right, you're all set to start if you'd like, John.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Hope everyone is well and safe. I'm going to call the Planning Committee of the Common Council to order at 7:02. I'm going to call a roll, if you don't mind saying here. If you are, I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Sirenides.
Here.
Ms. Shanahan. Mrs. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Livingston.
Here.
And Ms. Young.
Here.
Okay, and I am also here. Okay, moving on. We have the
Tom Keegan here.
Oh, Tom. Sorry about that, Tom. Let the record show Mr. Keegan is here.
Story of my life. Don't worry about it, Jim. Thank you.
You're in my heart, Tom. Don't think you're not. Okay, we're going to begin with the public hearing for the draft PY 46 Action Plan 2020-21 and a 5-year con plan 2020-24. Would someone like to briefly give us an overview of this before I open it up for the public hearing portion of the meeting?
Yeah, I can, John.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, good evening. Good to see you all. I feel like it's been far too long. But so we're here tonight for a public hearing on the draft PY 46 action plan, as well as our 5-year consolidated plan. As you recall, these are the projects that came before you and for your consideration and identification in recent months. And here we are to solicit public comment on the consolidated, which is our 5-year plan, as well as the yearly action plan. And just to know, we have not received any written public comments to date. So this is the opportunity to obtain those live if possible.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody have any questions on the committee? No, and if you do have a question, just please say your name and I have a question instead of raising the hand on the in the options setting. Okay, now I'll open up the public hearing. Has anyone signed up online, via email, or any other form of communication?
We've received nothing via email submission. There are 4 participants that aren't, well, 4 participants. Some are city staff. I know Joyce Liu is here as an attendee, Jeff Rodriguez as an attendee, Mary Wint, and then we have 1 call-in. If you wanna, I can hit them to unmute if you wanna just go down the list.
Sure, if you don't mind doing it in order and have them state their name, that'd be great.
So the first is a telephone call-in number. I don't know if this is for public comment or staff. It ends in 502. If you want to speak now, you're unmuted.
Hi, I'm the secretary. This is Rosemary. I'm taking the minutes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And then the other 2, I think, are city staff.
Okay. So we have no one that would like to speak at the public hearing. Okay, moving on. Public hearing amendment of the citizen participation plan to include a 5-day comment period to accommodate development of CDBG CV funding. Most of you saw it in the backup. We've been lucky enough to be awarded $521,000 and some change from federal government. And these funds need to be applied to COVID-19 related issues. I've asked that Deanna from the health department and Lamont from community service advise us. I think that would benefit everyone, just so we know what the needs are of the city. And so as soon as we start getting these applications, they're going to play a part in this and give us some advice and what they think would be the best, what the best needs would be for our city, because they're the ones with the boots on the ground. So I will now open up the public hearing portion of it. Is there anyone signed up on the phone or email that would like to speak?
I don't believe so. Let me see if Mary Wynn would like to talk. Mary, you're unmuted.
I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
No problem. So there's nobody, John.
Okay.
John,
So
this is Lisa Shanahan. I just wanted to let you know that I joined the meeting and I think I missed the roll call.
Okay. Let the record show Ms. Shanahan is participating. Sabrina, are you the host?
I am the host.
Would you allow me to share my screen, please?
Sure.
I think it's helpful when we have the agenda, everyone can look at. Okay.
And John, this is Dominique Johnson. I also joined the meeting.
Oh, let the record show Dominique Johnson is on the call as well. Are there any other council members participating?
Yeah, John, David Huvelman is here also.
Great, David.
John, Greg Burnett's on the call.
Great, thank you. And I know the mayor was here a minute ago. Any other members?
The mayor's still here.
Hey, Mayor. Okay, moving on.
John, if I may, just real quick, just for the record, to show that there was no public comment received in writing prior to the meeting as well.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, moving on. We have public participation. Has anyone signed up via email, on the phone for public participation in regards to any other items on the agenda?
Nope, nobody signed up or an attendee.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina.
Yep.
So now we will close public participation. All right, let's do approval of the minutes of March 5th. Well, it's a long time ago. 2020 regular meeting. I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Yay, nay, or abstain? Yes, okay. Mr. Sirenides?
Yes.
Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes, and I'll move that if you need a motion.
Oh, thank you for moving that, Ms. Smith. And I am also a yes, so that's unanimous. Oh, Darlene, I'm sorry, I apologize. Darlene, Ms. Young. You there, Darlene?
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. I'm going to share my screen now to, as we get into the capital budgets, it might be easier for everyone to see.
Here are some results from a search.
Bear with me for a second. Page 40. Okay, I've found in the past, the best way to do this is go through department. And if the department representative could just give a brief overview of their requests, and then we'll open it up to questions for the committee. And if you don't mind, if the committee members be allowed to ask questions first, and if there are other members, council members attending this meeting, if you could save your questions till after the questions have been answered by the committee members. Okay, and I believe first we have the police department. I believe Deputy Chief Zecca, I believe you're on the call. Will you be speaking to this item tonight?
Nope, this is the chief. I'm here also.
Oh, hey, Chief, how are you?
Good, thanks. You just want me to go quickly and describe?
Yeah, I mean, the brunt of your financing, your budgeting is going to cars and vans. If you don't mind just giving us a quick overview of, what you intend to spend the money on and where that money's going.
Okay, first for cars and vans. In the past, our vehicles were always in the operating budget, but this year a change was made to move them to the capital. So this is the first year that they've been in the capital budget. So if this is a normal expenditure, but again, it's been moved from operating to capital. The second item was the firing range we asked for, which was pushed off to next year. And then there was no other items for the police department this year. However, we're also speaking for the combined dispatch, which is the console and radio project, which has been in there for the last 5 years. And we're getting to the point of actually moving forward with the radio project, which is a complete overhaul of the entire city radio system, not just police, but police, fire, DPW, Parks and Rec, the whole works.
Yeah, I've heard that's a project in itself. Okay.
Yes.
Any questions from the committee for Chief Kohalik?
John.
Yes, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you. Chief, is the new combined communications, so that everybody will be on the same system? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. It'll be a trunk system through the state. We'll be using the state system. Okay. So we'll actually be a subsystem of the Connecticut state system, which will allow interoperability among all city agencies if needed, and interoperability with the state police and other police agencies, fire throughout the area.
Right, that's what I was wondering. Okay, thank you. Hey, John, just one thing before we move on. Can somebody tell what the difference in the red, white, and green colors mean on the spreadsheet?
We have our finance director on this call. I see you there, Henry. Do you mind giving us telling us defined
I would love to. Thank you, Henry Dackwitz, CFO. But Angela Fogel, the budget director, is in charge of these spreadsheets. So she can help explain the red, white, and green.
Hi, this is Angela Fogel, Budget Director. The finance recommended, if that is in red, that was modified from the department request. The white for Planning Commission, that's the Planning Commission made a modification. And the green on the mayor's column is if the mayor made a modification.
Good, great. I've seen also, why I have you, Angela, under department revenue, it's not specific to the police department, but I've seen it down. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Right. The revenue column, in previous years, the revenue was just shown in aggregate at the bottom. And Henry thought it would be useful to show project by project when you're making a decision on the project, is that, you know, total, he wanted to show the net cost, not just on an aggregate basis, but project by project, since that's how you're making your decisions.
Let me just embellish and add on. When I walked in the door about a year ago, I saw a very large number for authorized projects. But then I learned that that's not what we need to borrow, because there's revenue offsetting what those commitments are. So I felt it was appropriate, and I used the terms gross and net. This is the gross amount of a project. The net amount is the net that we have to finance, net of our expected revenue. So we track the costs on every project, but also the revenues expected on every project. And we anticipate borrowing the net amount, which is that third column. And I'll go into more detail later on why that's critical for when we're looking at our total capacity for capital projects. It becomes, we have a maximum ceiling on what our finances would allow us to borrow in total. So it would be improper if we compared it to the gross authorizations. So by getting a net number, I can look at, here's what we're going to need to borrow, compare it to what our borrowing capacity is, and then fit it into the many years that we have for capital projects.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, do we have any other questions in regards to police capital budget request? Hearing none. Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Let's move on to Fire Department. Chief, I believe I saw you on the call.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Planning Committee. So I have 9 projects, but they're very low number dollar value compared to some of these other departments. So we'll go through the first one, which is the battery powered extrication equipment. So what that is we're replacing our old hydraulic Hearst tool equipment, which is vehicle extrication equipment that we carry for automobile accidents and things like that, to battery powered, which is a much stronger. Can you hear me?
Yes, Chief.
Okay. A much stronger system, which the battery operator works on 12,500 PSI and is capable of cutting the newer high strength steel that the new cars all have versus the 500 PSI hydraulic system for the hydraulic. So you would think it'd be the other way around, but the battery powered is, plus it's portable equipment. There's no hoses to drag around. It's all battery powered. So that's one. Do you want to answer questions on each one?
I mean, I guess if I'll ask the committee if they have any questions, and if they do, then if you can please just respond to those.
Okay.
Are there any questions to the committee for Chief Gatto? No? Okay. All right.
Can I go to the second one?
I mean, you don't have to go through each item unless anyone on the committee feels like the chief should. I mean, I guess we have the biggest maybe the larger items, if you don't mind. I see,
Okay, the next one is the mobile radio upgrade, which is the largest that I'm asking for. So this past year, we just purchased 49 new portable radios, which is the tri-band radio, portable radio that each individual carries. And this allows us to communicate on 3 different bands, along with the mutual aid, our partners with Stanford and Wilton and Westport and New Canaan. So now the Motorola all band radio, the 25, these are the mobile radios. These are the ones that go inside the vehicle to be compatible with the portables that we just bought. But this will also be compatible with the new radio system that the Chief Cahogue was talking about. So we bought, or we're purchasing all this equipment to be in conjunction to work with the new radio system. Chief King is on the call. He's the one involved in all the radio stuff. If you have any questions, he'd be happy to answer them. But that's the gist of that Motorola. Includes the antennas that you need, radio antennas and cable. You have to program every one. So that's the big total is 177 for that. Questions? No questions? Okay.
all right, I lost you guys for a minute. I apologize. Can you all hear me?
John, you kind of
breaking
broke up for me.
Wow, okay.
You're fine now. You're fine.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions for Chief Gatto? No. I'm sorry, Darlene, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. I had a quick question, actually. I know you guys are looking to buy a new tiller. Was that in last year's budget, Chief?
It was.
Okay.
The money's already there. It's been out to bid. They're finalizing that now. They're getting close to ordering it.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Can I
Thank you,
just-
Chief.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you very
Take
much.
Hopefully everyone can hear me because this seems to be choppy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We have Public Works. Mr. Carr, how are you, sir? Are you there?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. So I'll keep it brief. The department is overall very pleased with that request. We asked or requested about $26 million. Excuse me, I'm sorry, $33 million and received about $26 million in the request so far, which is about 80%. That includes the divisions of engineering, operations, recreation, and parks and facilities. That does not include WPCA. We basically going to continue with work with pavement, curbs, and sidewalks underneath engineering with some specialty projects like the West Cedar Bridge underneath the engineering division. We're going to continue our tree planting operations. We are requesting additional funds for our fleet replacement, which we do every year, which is a rolling stock. The big purchase for that, or the big ticket item, would be the Vector truck, which I went down personally to see with Mr. Torrey down in the plant in Chicago to see how those trucks are assembled. So the price tag, although very high, is definitely well worth it and will allow us to efficiently clean out our catch basins and our storm sewers. That's the big ticket item on the operations side. Recreation and parks, we have the design and construction of some major ball fields, which include West Rocks, some of the softball fields too. Give me 1 second. On Broad River, other improvements within the Parks and Rec division include just typical maintenance for the facilities. Some of that's design, some of that's actual construction. And then for buildings too, there's a litany of facilities repairs that will include City Hall and also the Public Works Center. So there's a lot of different things going on within the divisions, but I'm very happy with the work output too from the staff the effort they put into comparing and preparing past budgets and the new budget. It was a new system, new CFO. Angela did great with the spreadsheet. The process ran very, very well. Our input was solicited, and I think strongly taken into consideration since we were receiving 80% of the funds requested. So I think that's a win. I'm very pleased. If anybody has any specific questions, I'll try to answer them. We also have Nick Roberts on the phone, and also Vanessa, the principal engineer, who can answer any specific project questions that I can't answer.
Yeah, this is Barbara Smith. I just have one question on the Cranberry Park. There was an ask of 1.5 million, and the final amount allotted is 580,000. I was just curious, what was that large amount for, and is that something that you would be looking for next year?
So the amount originally was for certain upgrades, but there's an amount that we requested and then an amount that we needed. And that smaller amount is more for the improvement of some of the amenities on the site. Nick, do you want to explain a little bit further?
Yes, sure. So the 1.5 million at Gallagher included the masonry restoration on the outside, replacement of the lead casings around the window, and waterproofing the basement. The 580 that was then recommended is going to cover the cost of the lead casings around the window. And then we would defer the other two items as far as waterproofing the basement and the masonry work next year.
Okay, so it's all specific to the mansion.
Correct.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Livingston, go right ahead.
Thank you. Anthony, I see in the, I guess the engineering budget, 50,000 for trees, and then in Parks and Rec, 65 for trees. So those are different programs?
Yes, the project listed in the engineering division is for trees within the right of way and is in part to maintain our compliance and with the Tree City USA program, whereas the project underneath Recreation and Parks are more for tree plantings within public property and including parks and beaches.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to chime in, Anthony and Nick. Well, first with you, Anthony. I mean, I want to thank the mayor, if he's still on this call, and you for getting this all together when it comes to water course maintenance. I see here that the mayor has recommended the $4 million. I know a lot of people are happy to hear that and to see it there with the mayor's recommendation. That's a lot of work and a lot of time put in to get to this point. And also, I mean, it's worth noting when, as far as our athletic fields to be finally financing the West Rock Soccer Complex and Broad River. I mean, these are huge steps, huge investments, but I think it ultimately will pay off. Quick question: when it comes down to paving a sidewalk project, you had requested 50,000, and what recommended. Can you give me a little insight on what that was for? Are we talking about our parks, where this paving a sidewalk work would have been done?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Nick, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, so yes, this request would have covered pavings and sidewalks within parks. And just to sort of echo your thoughts, you know, the budget recommendations includes new athletic complexes and turf fields at 3 different sites, which will also increase the playability and the bandwidth and program capacity at those locations. So, you know, like Anthony said, it's a great budget for parks, and we definitely appreciate the support for parks.
Just a quick question: do you piggyback? Does Parks and I mean, now it seems to be an all-in-one.
Hey, John, you're breaking up. We can't hear you.
Yeah, it's choppy.
But
John, I can't hear anything you're saying.
No, huh?
No.
That's the internet connection is unstable.
All right.
I apologize, everybody. How about now? No.
Yes.
Good.
Quick question. Do you piggyback on paving and sidewalk projects for our parks onto the city's contract, paving contract?
I can answer that, Mr. Chairman. Vanessa Valadares from engineering. Yes, so
Have a-
under the paving management program, when we put our bid out, we always try to help the other departments. And we try to bid it together so we can get a very competitive price. So in the past, we have been doing some paving for the Board of Ed, Parking Authority, some fire department, Parks and Recs. So, I'm sorry? Can you guys hear me?
I hear you.
So what you see under the engineering, the request is only for roads. So the amount that we spend there is dedicated to all the roads that we pave on a yearly basis. And then that's why each department has to have their own request, and we ended up using those accounts when we pave. But we try to combine the bid to get the most competitive price available.
Similar to what we do with the Board of Education now?
That's correct.
Great. Yeah, I know there's significant savings there, I know, and it's always, okay. All right, great. All right, that's all the questions I have for the department. Anyone else want to chime in? No? Okay. Thank you all. You fantastic job. And now we're going to be moving on to, Nick, we already touched on a lot of the DPW items. Are there anything you want to chime in with?
No, just the approach we took in developing the request. We tried to address the aging infrastructure at Cranberry, as well as some of the playgrounds that needed to be replaced. There was a lot of feedback from the schools to replace Cranberry and Tracy, and those recommendations are in the budget. And like I said, we're trying to address the aging infrastructure, but also invest in our fields to increase our programming. So it's a blend of the both, and we're happy with the recommended budget.
Great. After no questions, I will now move on. I believe, Anthony, you're going to stick around for WPCA?
Sure.
All right. We've got buildings. I don't know, Mr. Lowe, are you on this call? Will you be handling this?
This is Neil Rennie. I'll be handling for Mr. Lowe. Can you hear me?
Right.
Yes.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Neil.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be handling for Alan.
Giving the committee a brief overview of your requests.
So we have multiple requests across our buildings. City Hall this year, we're looking to do air handler replacements. This is an ongoing plan that we've had going over the last 2-3 years, and we're going to continue that to replace all the air conditioning units. They're getting aged. They're 30 years old or better. We're also doing an elevator modification. We put money in there last year for the elevators, but that was only enough to do the ADA aesthetic side. This would handle the behind the scenes, the mechanical infrastructure. We have rooftop unit replacements over at the police department. These are units that are 15 plus years old. Obviously, it's a critical facility for us. They're getting aged. We're having major repairs that we have to take care of. So that's an ongoing project also that we're working on. The health department, we're looking to do an upgrade of all their heating, air conditioning system over there. That's original to the building, and we will be starting on that shortly. Public Works is another project we're looking at, $210,000. They have some hot water piping in there that originally was put in with Schedule 10 piping, which is very thin wall piping. And we're going to be looking to replace that before it starts failing on us. We have multiple energy conservation projects across all buildings. As we have failures, we look to put more efficient equipment in. better building controls, management controls, lighting upgrades across buildings. We have the branch library this year. The museum, we're looking to do a roof replacement and a roof replacement, phase 2 roof replacement at Ben Franklin. Any
Do you mind
questions?
chiming in, get into a little bit of detail, the Public Works Center? Can you tell me what work we're talking, what's the scope of that work?
It's just all it's hot water piping within the facility. It was done back originally with Schedule 10 piping. We're looking to go up to Schedule 20 piping, double wall thickness. We're way at the end of the life on the piping. So we're looking to do that replacement before it fails on us.
We're talking about South Smith Street, correct?
Correct.
I mean, we all know that building. I mean, I believe it was a building meant to last 20, 30 years or 20 years. And here we are these years later. I just bring it up because we spent quite a bit of money there, and maybe there should be more of a long-term plan to maybe something that's more efficient, just more reliable. Just a thought. Any other questions for Neil? Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Neil.
Great, thank you.
WPCA, Anthony, you're back. You got anything to talk about here?
Sure, we are not requesting any money for the collection system, which is the piping, but we are requesting money for pump station upgrades. A lot of the facilities, or the pump stations, I should say, are beginning to show age and wear and tear. Specifically, the Woodward Avenue, Bell Island, and Karen Drive pump stations do require replacement to ensure that the sanitary sewer flow is properly going from the users to the plant, and that there's no overflows or capacity issues in between. And then the $750,000 requested for the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation and improvement. This is basically a facility plan to identify any future improvements that we need to keep up with new technology, to replace any of the critical aging infrastructure, et cetera. So that money is for a plan, which will obviously be used to execute any long-term decisions about what we should upgrade in the facility. Currently, we have consultants looking at that, but we want to have the consultant take a snapshot of what we have today. Tell us, this is great, no change, this is good, we can do a little bit better here, or this is failing or aging, and you need to replace these components immediately. So the facility plan will essentially give us a guide, and will then dictate the capital improvement program that you see in front of you for each year, or for each 5-year block, if you will.
Anthony, this is Tom Livingston
Yes.
again. Am I correct that the WPCA generates revenues to offset this, or how does it work?
Yes, this and the CFO, since I don't want to overstep, but my engineering understanding of the fiscal situation with WPCA is that they have cash on hand. This is with their funds. They're not necessarily borrowing this money.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Right, since it's an enterprise fund, which is generated from sewer use fees, they have a very, very healthy on-hand cash reserve, if you will, for a lot of these capital projects. So although they're shown here on these spreadsheets, they're not affecting the city's bonding or borrowing.
Actually,
Henry, am I stating that correctly?
Absolutely correct. The WPCA is an enterprise fund. By definition, it looks like a commercial operation. So think of the parking authority, the WPCA, they charge user fees for revenues, and the pricing is designed to break even. The WPCA borrows independently, as does the parking authority. And if they maintain that balanced budget without requiring infusions from the city for the prior 3 years, then the rating agencies give them a rating independently, and it does not affect the city rating. And that has been true. for the last 3 years. So the WPCA can choose either to pay that money out of funds they have or choose to borrow, but then the debt service cost of those borrowed funds would be in their operating budget, and they would set rates sufficient to cover that as an additional expense. So it really doesn't affect the city. It's been well managed in the past, and we continue that relationship.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry, I had to get to an area with better cell phone or reception. Okay, any other questions for Anthony? All right, great. Thank you, Anthony.
Very welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Have a nice night.
And to you as well.
Take care.
Okay, next up, we have Economic and Community Development. Jessica, I believe you will be speaking to much of this. Or Catherine, I mean, who would like to speak to this?
Yep, so sorry, I was just muted. Each of the department heads are going to speak to their budgets. We have Catherine, Steve, Sabrina, and I are all on the call.
Okay, do you want to start with Catherine with Transportation, Mobility, and Parking?
Sounds perfect. Yep, Catherine, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, hang on a second. I guess I should. Hello, everybody. Good evening. The Transportation, Mobility, and Parking capital budget shows the investment into transportation, mobility, and parking systems and infrastructure for the city of Norwalk. For the most part, we are really pleased with the recommendations made by the mayor. One of the biggest investments is the continued investment into the traffic signal system. These are ongoing investments into signals that are over 30 years old and those that are not covered by state and federal grants. We also have, and I'm going to skip over a couple of these because I want to come back to a little change that we're making within.
Excuse me for a second. John, can you move your screen so that we can see the right line items?
Oh yeah, you're on Public Works.
I apologize. I'm just trying to get some. My son will get off the Xbox, so my signal's horrible. Give me a second.
That might be more interesting.
Yeah.
Probably.
Can you see it?
You're right there. Yes.
Yeah. You know what? Let me see if I can do this. Maybe. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, and then it also includes investments into safe routes to school, sidewalks, and biking type of infrastructure. And we work very closely with the schools and the Bike Walk Commission on their priorities. One of the things that we're working on with the related to safe routes to school and the Bike Walk Commission is the priority to invest in sidewalks for those kids that do not get bus service and to install new sidewalks. And we're also working with the schools with their bell time task force to see how that impacts traffic and traffic systems. We don't know what that will mean now that we're post-COVID or into COVID, or how that's going to work out when the schools start back up in the fall. We also have some specific requests and recommendations related to Rowayton Avenue sidewalks and George Avenue sidewalks, and our continued investments into the Norwalk River Valley Trail. We do have one small change, which will not change the cap or any additional money, but just changing some of the funds from one account to the other. Again, we are in agreement with the recommendations from the mayor. We're asking that $40,000 be moved from the Transportation Master Plan, which is the C0514, to Fleet C0650 to replace one of the critical department vehicles. Just to give you a little background, we did originally request to replace 2 vehicles. And as we were going through the legislative approval process, we decided that one of those was very critical to be replaced. I did speak to the fleet manager who is, hang on a second, let me see if I can, it's not working. Show, just, I'm trying to get this screen up here. Oops, did I lose you guys?
And we're still here.
Okay, I'm still here. Okay. I did speak to the fleet manager who works for operations and engineering about this, and he confirmed everything in an email, which I'll read to you. He said the truck is a 2008 with over 110,000 miles, and it was previously, as you know, TMP was under Public Works, so that truck was previously a DPW foreman truck. And although they have made substantial repairs on the truck to keep it in service, it is just not reliable as a frontline truck and can cause substantial interruptions of the TMP services due to the number of breakdowns that it has had. He is recommending that we replace this now, so to meet the needs of the department for day-to-day operations and emergency services. We are requesting that those be moved from the transportation master plan to the fleet account.
Okay. Yeah, I know we had this discussion earlier. And thank you for that update. I will be proposing an amendment for that change after everyone's had the opportunity to present. So if you don't mind staying on the line, Catherine, and we'll get to that shortly.
Catherine, if I could, Tom again, on the safe routes to school, what school is that?
Mike Yosak's on the line. We had talked about it. We were originally thinking about Silvermine, but that could change depending on what's going. And this was all, a lot of these conversations were pre-COVID, and I know I'm using that because a lot of transportation and mobility trends are changing. So we are working with the Bike Walk Commission and the schools at the same time to determine what their priorities are. But before all this happened, what we were looking at, like I said, were installing new sidewalks for those kids that do not get bus service to help alleviate parents from having to drive them, or in some cases, like some kids take Uber all the time. So it would alleviate some of that.
Okay, isn't there a state funding part of this?
Mike is on the phone. There he is. Okay.
Hi, Tom. It's Mike. There was funding in the old federal funding. The funding is still there, but now it's not designated just for safe routes to schools. It's designated for trails, safe routes to schools, and everything. So it's much more difficult to get. The state has some connectivity funds, which we got this year. We'll be doing sidewalks on Hunter's Lane for Ponus, so as Catherine explained, we were looking at Silvermine in next year's funding, but that may change because Silvermine, the school has a request in for driveways for Silvermine, which might take care of some of that.
Sorry, just to be clear, so you're not counting on state funds for this?
And no, we're not.
Okay, and I'm sorry, just one last question, and it has to do with your request for a change. What does that do to the plan?
Oh, I'll give you a summary of what it does. So the original request, just to give you a real quick summary, the original request was $500,000. That included design-ready concept plans. While we were processing through this, we decided to change that to $250,000, which would only include a study and recommendations, and then we would come back in the later years for, depending on the recommendation for whatever areas and locations related to the plan, come back for the design and then the construction. Now, the trends for transportation mobility have changed very quickly, and different types of trends are being accelerated. We have spoken about this. In our opinion, we can develop a more flexible scope that will address some of these new COVID transportation and mobility trends. There are economies of scale, efficiencies, and an opportunity to combine the funding and recommendations related to the biking, sidewalks, and those specific sidewalk evaluations in Rowayton and George Avenue to be folded into the transportation master plan instead of having separate consultants. And this overall makes sense to evaluate this comprehensively, not just individually. Also, there is some competition in the consultant world right now, so we can leverage that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions under the transportation, mobility, and parking section of the capital budget? Okay, thank you, Catherine. Don't mind sticking around.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
You're welcome. Okay, so planning and zoning. Steve, are you here?
I am.
Welcome.
How are you doing?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good.
If you don't mind just giving us a quick summary of the items that have been recommended and requested by your department.
Sure. The sole item that we are requesting is $200,000 to update the zoning regulations. You may recall that we did hire a consultant in 2019 to do an initial evaluation of the regulations and to help us develop a budget in order to do a complete rewrite of the regulations. So we did go through that process in 2019. We're comfortable with the $200,000 figure. The end product, which we hope to start working on this summer, will result in kind of a web-based format. We're hoping it's very easy to use, user-friendly, and a lot less clunky than the current zoning regulations we're working with right now.
I believe there was some funding this past year that we put towards that. Is memory serving me correctly?
Yes, correct. We did do an initial study that was $20,000.
Okay. And has that study come back?
Yeah, so we did have a report that went out. It's been so long since I looked at the capital budget, to be honest with you. I think we may have sent that out with that, but if not, I can make that available to you.
That'd be great if you don't mind sending that to the committee.
Sure.
That'd be great. Okay. Any questions for Steve, committee members? No? Okay, great. All right, thanks, Steve. I guess you'll be sticking around for your second half here at the end.
Got it.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, well, I just jumped down again. Okay, next up we have
Me, Sabrina.
yes, Sabrina. Hello.
Hi. So
Oops.
I have,
Sorry.
I have 3 requests though, totaling, I believe it's $200,000. There's $50,000 for the business incentive economic line item, and that's to hire a consultant to do the TIF analysis study that we've discussed in planning committee before a few times. So that would include the financial plan for that, any incentives that we would make that come out of that, and really just a comprehensive in-depth analysis into our tax base in the area that we're looking at specifically. The second piece of my request is tourism branding and marketing initiative. So it's not rebranding the city per se, but really branding our neighborhoods and destinations and our other larger institutions in the city and putting them into a holistic location where we can promote and market ourselves so that we can get tourists to come here or visitors or even new residents, things like that. We have something similar to it right now, but a lot of different sources have information about what to do in Norwalk. So we're trying to consolidate all of that, create one holistic brand that we can then promote ourselves as the city. This includes, other events and things like that that we don't currently have in place. And then the last one is a business outreach and marketing strategy for $50,000, which is really to create marketing materials for the city to market itself to larger and smaller companies to come and move here. So that would include pitch decks, printed materials, web-based materials, those types of things so that we can really promote Norwalk as a place to work and get companies to move here and as well as employees to move here. And then to actually spend the dollars to promote it instead of just making it. So doing both of those things. So those are the three items on my ask.
I think that's great. I mean, I've been saying it for years, just regional advertising and outreach and marketing for Norwalk is a great way to get people here and people aware of it. And I think, the mall really put us on the map. So let's take advantage of that. Okay, great. Any questions for Sabrina? No? Okay, moving on. Historical Commission, I believe I saw Mr. Westmoreland here. David, are you here?
I believe that David wasn't able to join us, but he is if you have any questions, and I can call him and he will be able to join. He was just a few different commitments tonight.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw him. Maybe.
It's on the panelist list as signed on.
Okay, and I swear I did see his name on the list, but or as logged in. Okay, I guess he wasn't. I mean, does anyone have any questions for Historical Commission? We can maybe come back to this and try to get a hold of him.
John, he is signed on. I see his name.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Maybe he's just logged in and. David, one more shot. No. Going once, going twice.
Let me text him and get him on the line.
Okay. All right, let's move on and let me know if he chimes in. Okay. Arts Commission. Is anyone here from the Arts Commission?
So I'm staff. This is Sabrina again. I'm staff to the Arts Commission, so I can speak to that item as well. So there's a $50,000 ask mainly to promote art installations in and around Martin Luther King Boulevard. As some of you have participated in the past, we've been working with the state on the Martin Luther King initiative, which was a planning initiative to kind of brighten and give more opportunity to the Martin Luther King corridor, which that geography extends from the actual street of Martin Luther King over to the harbor side almost, kind of edging at Day Street. So the Arts Commission put in for $50,000, 25 of which would be a match for another $25,000 grant we applied for Bloomberg Philanthropies. We haven't heard back from them yet, but $25,000 of that 50 would be used for that. The other $25,000 would be to expand upon that. And the Arts Commission is working right now on kind of a holistic package to do signage, other art installations like sculptures, things like that, that can be installed in the geography.
Any questions? Thanks again, Sabrina. You wear many hats. Okay. Parking Authority. Catherine, will you be speaking to this?
Yes, I will be speaking to this. So there are three asks or requests, and like Henry explained, the Parking Authority is structured as an enterprise fund, as the same as the WPCA. So the first one is the continued investment into this large city parking structures, the South Norwalk Railroad Station, the Haviland Deck, Yankee Doodle Garage, and well, I'm missing a Maritime Garage. And those, that request is based on a facility assessment that the Parking Authority has done. They have that done every 3 years. Then the other two requests, the parking, residential parking permits and parking wayfinding signage studies, are related to the strategic plan that the Parking Authority recently approved.
Okay. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Well, so the parking facilities, you've got in yellow is the revenue that you brought in through violations, ticketing, whatever revenue sources you have, correct? The 912,000.
Right. So if there is debt service, the Parking Authority is responsible for paying the debt service.
Got it. Yep. I'm aware of that. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
John, just wanted to note that David is on the phone and that I can also speak to the small business Main Street program and the library architectural services as well.
Okay, let's go back to that. Apologize, just skipped over. So David is ready to speak to the historical commission items?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Let me just get to it. Yeah, David, if you just don't mind giving us a summary of your items, and we'll open it up to questions for the committee.
Sure. So the first item we have is $134,000 for our continuing project based off our master plan for Mill Hill. The title says ADA Access Mill Hill, but it's ADA Access and Master Plan for Mill Hill. This is just a continuing work on that. We'll be painting in the interior and the exterior of the building. We're doing a lot of work. As you can see, the townhouse is scaffolded now. We're repointing the brick, but then we have some wood replacement that needs to be done and other repairs. We're also doing substantial electrical work on the interior and additional lighting, getting ready for our new permanent exhibit that we'll be installing for the school children's program, which covers the Ice Age history of Norwalk from the Ice Age to 1835. The next item is Lockwood House ADA access. That's the museum building, $314,000. We have been working for a number of years now trying to get an elevator installed in the building to complete the ADA access there. We have some funding for that already, but we went out to bid and we were substantially short over what was required. So the $314,000 we're asking for will complete the ADA access for the elevator and other interior alterations that have to be done for that. And then that building will be fully ADA compliant. Smith Street buildings, this is the renovation of the old jail. Based on the finance director's recommendation, we need another $155,000 or so to finish the interior of that building. Based on the finance director's recommendation, we cut that down to $21,000 for this year because I still have some money and I can get substantial work done this next year with that money. And then I'll just ask for the rest in next year's budget. $50,000 for the Lockwood Matthews Mansion continuing repairs. We just completed replacing the porch roof and the ceiling, and now we have to repair rotted wood on the porch and repaint, and that's what most of that money is going for. And then finally, the $10,000 is money for the city's museum collection for archiving and conservation work that we're doing with our collection, just regular collection care work.
Thank you. I mean, you made mention about the LDA, the ADA compliance of both Lockwood and Mill Hill. I mean, I feel like that's been on every capital budget I've seen in the last however many years. Are we close to buttoning that up, or is that still an ongoing project?
Yeah, we try to keep our projects small. So on Mill Hill, this is like the upper site for Mill Hill is done. The ADA work is done. The title is misleading because the whole title doesn't fit. It's ADA access and master plan. So we're doing this money for the $134,000 is for other work, other renovation work for the building and restoration work.
And I know you guys receive a lot of support and grants. Is that still the case? Because I remember it being so over the past years.
We do, yeah. We received a $35,000 grant that's going to fund the permanent exhibit that's going in the townhouse once all this stuff is done from Connecticut Humanities. The Lockwood House ADA project, that is a true ADA project. And we divided that into 5 phases so that we could keep our budget manageable and wouldn't be a bunch of heartburn. to try and fund. So we chunk it up into smaller projects. That's why you see it over and over is that we do everything in 5 or 6, phases of usually around $200,000.
I believe there were ramps, elevators.
Yep.
I mean, we had
We've done the ramps. We asked for elevators last year. We got some money, but it wasn't enough. So we're coming back for the rest. And additionally, all the other changes. So that will be all the ADA access work for the museum building with this request.
All right, thank you, David. Any questions for Mr. Westmoreland? No. All right. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Stay safe.
You too. Okay, we've done, now we're going down to Health Department. Deanna, are you with us?
Hi, Chair Kaidi. I just want to just introduce myself. This is Lamont Daniels, Chief of Community Services. So I'm joined by the department heads. They'll speak respectfully to each department. Just wanted to greet the planning committee and thank you. And then we can yield to those that are on the agenda on behalf of the Community Services Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamont. I mean, we've got a pretty small ask. Can you just give us a description on, explanation on what this money will be used for?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. This is Deanna J. Moore, the health director for the city. I'm requesting money for upgrades to our building. The majority of the money would be spent on improvements to our clinical exam rooms, new equipment, new improvements, as well as some improvements to our waiting room area in the health department.
Are we talking about COVID-related items such as, this, plastic screens or whatever it may be?
It's actually not specific to COVID. It's just, it's for our exam rooms where we have a sexual health clinic, we have vaccination clinics, we do TB treatment and testing as well. So it's for our general operations, but it could be used for multiple purposes moving forward related to our clinics.
Deanna, have you seen any unforeseen expenditures that due to COVID that weren't included in this budget that you see coming down the pipe?
We've had increased staffing hours for some of our preparedness. We've incurred, some OT, but we've been able to utilize existing funds as well as the CDC has awarded crisis funding for state and local health departments. It's more just looking at staffing resources and what it takes to respond to a pandemic and to keep, general health department operations that we've been looking at and discussing with Lamond. But in terms of, any, I can't identify like an immediate need in terms of equipment, that's needed.
Okay, so more so on the operating side,
right,
than the capital side.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, great. Who will be speaking to the Human Relations and Fair Rent section?
That would be Anna Keegan.
Hi, this is Anna Keegan. I'm the acting director of Human Relations and Fair Rent. Our request is fairly simple. It's $100,000 for ADA compliance. We use this fund every year to work on increasing ADA access to city programs and facilities. This year, what we're aiming to do, in addition to the projects that are already encumbered from previous years, is install another Mobamat at the beach to improve access at the beaches, a new pathway to connect the parking lot to the play area at San Vincenzo Park, and to increase the accessibility of the showers at the marina.
Oh, okay. Great. Any questions for Anna? All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have the library.
And that will be Chris. Chris, are you here?
Chris, are you here?
I saw her.
I did see her. So there she is. You're on mute, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, you may be on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, boy. Yeah, I know. Watch what you say. Well, nice to see, quote unquote, see everyone tonight. It's we just cope with whatever comes along. We have a small capital request, and not that we were prescient or anything, but 2 out of the 3 asks are needed even more with what we're looking toward with reopening. The first one are the laptop dispensers. We had seen these actually at the new Westport Library, and we've seen our desktop computer use go down, and use of Wi-Fi, which is strong in both of our libraries. We've seen that use go up. So we wanted to add some laptops for people to check out with their library card, use in the library, and then put back in the dispenser, and they would be charged. So they would always be ready to go. Well, of course, now when we look to reopening, we're going to have to reconfigure those computer areas totally to observe social distancing. And one of the things we can do is use laptops, and we're hoping to get some additional ones as well. Use laptops throughout the building so that people can access the Wi-Fi and be safe and apart from each other. So I appreciate that it'd been approved in the budget anyway, but needed now more than ever. The other thing is the digitization project. And I want to say thank you to all of you in government and on the councils over the years. The Norwalk newspapers are our history. They're the primary source material of our history. And every year we have done a project to digitize more issues of the newspapers. This is a rather big ask because it's the Norwalk Hour from 1929 to 1950. So important years in our history, but you've always been so supportive. And as you can imagine, for the 2 months that we've been closed, we've been getting a lot of calls to the history room because people are home and they have time to look up their family history and do all that kind of research that people don't have time for during the workday when they're at the office. So that's been great. The other ask is to refurbish our auditoriums, both in Sono and at the main library. And we will not be having any large gatherings in the near future, but we appreciate the support. I know the ask was cut back a bit, and we'll reconfigure what we had planned to do there. It probably won't change that much, but I'm sad that our use of the auditoriums will be not there for a while because of what's going on. But you know, when we're ready to get back, the auditorium should be ready. So we appreciate your support on that.
Thank you, Chris. I'll quickly chime in. I think digitizing newspapers is a great service and a great, thing to do. This is recognizable. I see it often in the capital budget. Is it annually $50,000?
No, it's not that much. It's been, I would say the past 5 years, it's been more like 20,000 a year. We started out with we did the Norwalk Gazette, which was frightening because that was in print only. That was the first one. And then the South Norwalk Sentinel, that's all done. And now we're working our way through the hour. This is this chunk is the biggest ask that we've made. And it's a nice project in that we work with the money we have. We'd like to do that amount from 29 to 50, but if we can't do that in this year, we'll go from 29, maybe through 45 or something. So it's flexible, but we're each year working away on the digitization. So in another few years, we should be done and we should have the record of, like I say, the primary source material for our city.
Right, and just one more quick question was the auditorium refresh, and I know there's plans to renovate the main library.
Yes.
Do you think it's premature to be refreshing the auditorium? And I don't know the timeline of when that project will actually break ground, but do you think maybe perhaps delaying the refreshing of the auditorium until a plan is put in place for the library itself? Or
Gotcha. That's a very good concern, and I think that was part of the concern of the finance department for cutting back. Sono, as you know, is it's done, it's refurbished, and we don't have to worry about that. The reason we had this in, even though we're hoping to break ground on a new addition to the main library and a new auditorium in 3, 4, 5 years, is because it got so much use the past couple of years. The demand for that size, holds 175 people. That size of a venue is just amazing.
Are we speaking of the room that the DTC has meetings in?
Yeah, that's it.
Got
it. Yeah, it's got 175 person capacity, and so that's why, because we felt to have modern business meetings there, we really needed to up that the projection and the sound especially, and we also wanted to be able to stream live events. We've had several performances, but also discussions that really should be streamed, and we have a great website, we have a YouTube channel, it could go right to there. So the reach would be greater than the people who are actually able to be at the event. So we were going to try to focus in on that part of it.
Got it. Okay.
For the next couple of years.
Chair, may I just add to it in speaking with Chris? The space that you are referencing, it also brings in a modest revenue. And I know Chris and I talked about being able to modernize all the Wi-Fi will also allow us over time, again, recognizing we're in COVID right now, but once it's up and running, it would also allow us to attract other organizations who really require or need this high level of technology for their programming, conferences, and symposiums. So we will be able to say yes now and also charge.
Mm-hmm.
Understood. Any other questions? Seeing none. All right. Thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Deanna, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move past the Board of Education and go to redevelopment, come back to you guys. I know we have a member of the committee that will need to recuse herself. So next up, we have the Redevelopment Agency. Brian, are you there?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
Good, sir.
Good. So we have two specific items. One for affordable housing. The $250,000 is allocated to support phase 2 at Soundview Landing. And then the other item here is for our general facade improvement program, $150,000 for the rehabilitation of historical structures. So pretty straightforward, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Looks like you're getting the same amount you received last year.
Correct.
Hey, Brian, it's Tom. How many units can you get with this? And how much can you do with this?
Are you referring to the for the affordable housing money?
Well, actually, both of it. I mean, how many facades can you improve? How much can you do with affordable housing?
Yeah, Tammy, are you on the line right now?
I am. Phase 2 of Soundview Landing is, Tom, hang on one second. I think it's about 100 units. But I'd have to double check the number. So phase 2 is nearing completion, and this $250,000 is to leverage the completion and the construction of phase 2 down on the corner of Day and Raymond Street. The facade improvement money is for non-residential historic properties. So it's for commercial properties and churches and synagogues and other religious historic structures in the urban core. We have other CDBG money that can be used for residential purposes. And this facade money, the commercial and non-residential facade money fills a hole that we can't fill with CDBG. So $150,000 can probably do about 3 projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all. All right, information and technology. Do we have someone to speak to that?
Yes, this is Karen Del Vecchio.
Hi, Karen, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Very well.
All right. Let me get started here. So the IT capital budget includes capital projects in support of public safety, the library, the health department, and public works, as well as citywide infrastructure refreshes and enhancements. Our ask this year is $433,860. Sort of breaks up into $75,000 for public safety, $73,000 for library projects, and then about $286,000 for citywide initiatives. Some of the highlights of some of these projects include our traditional and annual desktop refresh program, which replaces computers and workstations and laptops and tablets in all of the locations. Those that are approaching end of life, end of useful life, those that are in rough conditions like the public works garage, and locations like the patrol cars that have special requirements for their equipment. We have some server upgrades planned for public safety and the library for this year. We continue with our risk mitigation and cybersecurity initiatives that we started several years ago. We also have some wireless upgrades planned for City Hall and for the library area outside of their auditorium, which is in their auditorium budget. We're doing some other work at the library so that some of their public printers will be able to accept credit cards, so they won't be on all cash basis as they are now. Try to reduce the amount of cash handling that goes on. All in all, we're very pleased with that the mayor and the finance and the chief financial officer are supporting these initiatives. I'm happy to answer any questions about specific projects.
I just wanted, the mayor made mention at the last caucus meeting that due to COVID-19 that there'll be, your department will be tasked with COVID-related IT projects. Do you foresee a need for additional funding, and was this request taking into account those additional expenses?
This budget was prepared before COVID-19 hit. If there are specific projects that the mayor has in mind, we have not had an opportunity to discuss those specifically. However, from a general point of view, I think the goal is to move as many transactions as possible to an electronic or a digital or virtual transaction. So if we've seen nothing, it's the reduction in foot traffic in City Hall over the last 3 to 4 weeks has really highlighted the need to move more applications and permits and those types of interactions and transactions to the web.
Okay, so you foresee additional workload, an increase in your workload due to COVID-19 because of all things being hands-off and digitized and online payments, or whatever the case may be.
Correct. And I think the technologies are there. We need to use them. We need to exploit them more. I think the changes are going to be more on the process side. We need to look at how we do things currently and how we can do them differently. And that's a collaborative effort between the IT department and the department heads and the chiefs to see, let's look at our key core critical services that we provide, and can we get those moved to a virtual environment or to the web, and then what processes have to change in the office in order to accommodate that.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, you're needed more than ever now, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
John, can I add a comment, please?
Sure.
I think what's happened with COVID is we've had some hits in the current year budget. So Karen and her team have ordered more laptops for individuals to take home. For cybersecurity purposes, we only allow laptops that are configured by us, owned by the city, to be connected with our networks. Okay. At the same time, these Zoom meetings or Microsoft Team meetings. So we've had some software costs, but we've also incurred overtime because people on IT staff normally staff Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and now they're needed in overtime capacities, especially helping coordinate meetings, et cetera. So we're getting some additional expenses this year. We're looking for reimbursements for some of them. And I think it's more of an evolution that we had already been planning for of automating certain workflows and continuing that process. So there might be some capital expenses, there might be some human and personnel costs, but I think the budget is pretty good for right now for what we expect for next year, assuming we're coming out of this in a reasonable time in the current 3-month quarter, which is our last fiscal quarter. So there's an impact in this fiscal year, but I think for next year we're positioned, but we're keeping our eyes open because there may be a gradual transformation as we automate more of these work processes.
Right. Yeah, I guess we got to adapt to the times. Thank you, Henry. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're just going to backtrack to the Board of Education. Mrs. Smith, I believe you wanted to recuse yourself.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as an employee working at Norwalk High School, just in order to avoid any appearance of conflict, I am recusing myself from any discussion on Norwalk High School, as well as the vote actually on the capital budget because of this item on the budget. But before I leave, I would just like to say I am really pleased to see the support for the new Cranberry School, for the Silvermine driveway, and of course for school security. So I am going to go ahead and leave the room. And if someone wouldn't mind just texting me when—
I can do it, Barbara.
Thanks very much.
And Mr. Cuddies, this is Lisa Shanahan. I'm going to have to leave the call right now, so I wanted to just make the minutes reflect that I also had to leave the call.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good night.
Bye. Good night, everybody.
Okay, Board of Education, I believe we have a few representatives that would like to discuss the capital budget.
Sure, I will start. I assume you can hear me?
Yes, Tom.
Sure. This is Tom Hamilton. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Norwalk Public Schools. And Bill Hodell, who is our Facilities Director, I believe is also on the call. I'd like to, thank you for the time tonight to consider these capital requests. I'd like to start out by, saying that thanking Mayor Rilling for his strong support for the Norwalk Public Schools, and particularly his strong support for the capital program of the Norwalk Public Schools. The budget before you tonight does represent the mayor's capital budget recommendations. And, I think obviously you see the recommendations, and there are two very large projects in here for the Board of Education, as well as a number of other smaller projects that are also important priorities for the Board of Education. So to just give you a brief background on the projects before you, the first project is Cranberry, a new Cranberry School at $45 million. You may remember from a couple of years ago, there was a smaller renovation. Actually, it was really just a new cafeteria project and air conditioning and some mandated code updates that would have gone along with those limited improvements at Cranberry. But that project came back, that limited project came back substantially over budget at, my recollection is over $17 million to undertake those limited improvements. It would have left bathrooms that had not been touched since the 1950s. It would have left single pane windows that were original to the building in the 1950s. It would have left many important parts of the building untouched. And so at that time, the city and the Board of Education basically, called timeout on that project and said, let's rethink this. And rather than spend $17 million on really an inadequate project, what would it take to do what really needs to be done there? And so what's before you is an appropriation as well as a conceptual design and conceptual cost estimate or a detailed cost estimate based on the conceptual design that will provide essentially an entirely new academic wing to the building. It will provide for the first time a separate cafeteria from gymnasium. It will provide all of the accoutrements necessary to make this really a top-notch school for the city. The only element of the existing structure really that would be reused is the gymnasium, which would undergo a renovation. So that's listed as the top priority for the school district, and obviously at $45 million, it's a major budget commitment. The ed specs are in the final phases of development, and we expect that the Board of Education will be approving those ed specs at their business meeting later this month. And obviously, if the council sees fit to support this project, then we would be geared up to submit a grant submission to the state this June, and would immediately go into detailed design work with construction to follow in about a year or so. The second project on the list is the Norwalk High School project, and I believe that the mayor's recommendation here represents the local share of the funding needed to support that project. And this obviously is a another very high priority for the school district and for the city. This is also another case where there were some fairly limited improvements that were being undertaken at Norwalk High School, but they, again, did not come anywhere near addressing all of the needs in that building. And fairly recently, back last year, it became apparent that there was a possibility that the district and the city could avail itself of an opportunity to have the state pick up a very substantial portion of the cost of this project if we were to find a creative and innovative way to position this project to serve really as a pilot for the state of Connecticut in terms of how to encourage cooperation between school districts in a way that's different from the old state system, which relied on magnet schools that received substantial operating subsidies from the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut had determined that they simply didn't have the resources to expand inter-district magnets. We have one here in Norwalk in the Global Center for Global Studies at Brian McMahon, but the state had put a moratorium on new magnets a number of years ago, and it indicated that they would not be developing new magnets. So the innovative approach here is to expand the district's P-TECH program at Norwalk High School, and also to develop what is already a very strong arts program at Norwalk High School into an arts academy, and to engage in a tuition exchange program essentially with other districts, where we could send our students to their schools, and then they in turn could send a limited number of students into these two specialized programs. And in exchange for that, the state has indicated that we would be eligible for an 80% reimbursement on the construction cost of this building. Absent that 80% reimbursement, I think, I don't want to speak for Henry Dakowitz, but I think the city had concluded that this would not have been an affordable project for the city to fund based on the normal 32% reimbursement.
Tom, can I just chime in real quick? I know very little about this project. It was mentioned to me that we're going to need to bring in students in order to reach this level of compensation by the state. Do you have any information, any specifics to that? How many students? What I've also heard talk that it's an exchange of students. Do we
Correct.
know?
Right. The concept is an exchange of students where we would accept up to 100 students from outside the district into the P-TECH program and the Arts Academy, and in exchange, we would have an equal number of seats in programs or schools that those districts may offer that would be attractive to our students.
So it'd be opened up to not only Connecticut students, regionally, I guess is, is there specific locations these students will be coming from, or do we have any, or is it too early to?
I think it's too early to say. I know the P-TECH model is very much based upon making the P-TECH program, which provides not only a high school degree, but a associate's degree as part of that. You know, we have a partnership with IBM and Norwalk Community College. So those students have internships that they take part in, and they ultimately receive their associate's degree as part of that program. So that program is really geared toward trying to help students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds who might not otherwise be able to afford to attend college, to get a college degree without having to take on large levels of debt and so on. So I think the P-TECH model and the P-TECH program is specifically intended to help serve underserved students from backgrounds with some challenges, and the Arts Academy may in fact serve a different type of student. So that that could be our suburban neighbors that might be interested in attending the Arts Academy. So we think it's going to be a number of different school districts that will be interested in this model, and coming probably from Fairfield County, we would generally expect.
I have a question.
Arlene, Ms. Young.
So Tom, is that exchange in each district 1-for-1? So if you've got 10 coming from Fairfield, we've got 10 seats there. And is there transportation cost associated with that on our end of getting those students to and from?
Yeah, I think some of those details still have to be worked out. We would expect that it would be a 1-for-1 type exchange. That's certainly everything I've heard is that it would be a 1-for-1 exchange. In terms of transportation, that would be one of the items that would have to be worked out in these agreements between the school districts. And we have some experience with that, certainly.
Yeah.
With CGS, we have a number of students who arrive in Norwalk every day on the train. Well, they did. Obviously, in the current environment, we're not open, but so we would pick them up at the train station and then bring them to Global Studies every day.
I have a question, John.
Tom, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm hoping Mr. Hamilton can answer this. The P-TECH Academy, am I correct that there is currently a waiting list of Norwalk students to get in there?
It's as I understand it, fully subscribed. I don't think there's a significant waiting list. There may be a handful of students, but it's not a material waiting list.
So it is possible that some Norwalk students would not get into P-TECH in favor of students from another community. Is that correct?
I don't foresee that being an issue. I think we're going to work this out in a way that certainly makes sure that Norwalk students have first preference for attending our programs.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, you said Cranberry School will start construction in about a year. We got any idea if this amount, Norwalk High School money is approved today, when that will begin construction?
Well, I think Norwalk High School is a little, there's a number of hurdles yet to overcome, one of which is because of the COVID situation. It's my understanding that the legislature has not yet acted on this. So one of the threshold issues that's going to happen for the project to move forward is the legislature will have to make sure that this is included in, in some sort of project priority list such that it's going to be funded at the 80% threshold. So that, as I understand it, that hasn't happened yet. So we would submit a grant application to the state at some point after that happens. I believe that there was an update that Alan Lowe and Jim Giuliano may have provided to the Land Use Committee the other night. I was not at that meeting, but so there may be members here. I'm looking at Councilman Livingston. I don't know if he has any additional information on that.
Thank you, Tom. I don't have a lot more to add to that. You're correct that the legislature adjourned for the year without having this special legislation. Talking to Senator Duff a few weeks ago, he suggested that they will try and do that in a special session, which will maybe held June or July. Other than that, I think we're all just sort of moving forward, and we'll see how it goes. Don't have much more to add, though.
Right. I mean, I think at this point, the Board of Education has approved the ed specs for the Norwalk High School project. And if the appropriation is in place, then the major steps the city would need to take to pull the trigger on the project would be in place. So I think that having the appropriation in place, though, is a vital piece of this, because you can't file a grant application. You can't take the next step if you haven't appropriated at least the local share of the project. I think everyone understands that if the legislation were not to be approved, that that the project can't go forward in this current form.
Do you have any other questions specific to Norwalk High School, so we can allow Tom to move on? No? Okay. All right, Tom, if you don't mind proceeding to the other items.
Sure. The next project on the list is listed as cafeteria kitchen renovations. You'll see we had requested $5,040,000, and what the mayor's recommended is $3,500,000. We had requested $3.5 million for the Narrowmack cafeteria and kitchen renovation. And Narrowmack is one of our schools that does not presently have a separate cafeteria from gymnasium, and it's on the district's strategic operating plan to provide a separate cafeteria from gymnasium at every elementary school. That was one of the major things we will be accomplishing at Cranberry as a result of that project as well. And so this was actually brought forward by the Narrowmack SGC, School Governance Council, and they had come forward and said, we had it on the plan, but we had it about 4 or 5 years out on the plan to construct a separate cafeteria. And the SGC came forward and indicated that they felt that there was existing space within the building that could be repurposed to create a cafeteria space. Ultimately, a architect was brought in, and they determined that that space would be suitable to use as cafeteria space. It would need some renovation, and we do need to construct then a separate kitchen. But this is deemed to be really a high priority for the district right now. That is one of our most crowded, difficult situations for students. We're lining, the narrow hallway and having to sort of snake their way through the hallway to get by the very small serving area and then bring their meals into the gymnasium. It just is not an ideal situation. It's too many different competing uses if you don't have a separate cafeteria from the gymnasium.
Yeah, both my kids went there, and I can attest to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that was certainly the highest of there were two other projects in there, one at Roten and also the replacement of kitchen equipment, but the 3.5 million for the Narragansett cafeteria and kitchen is certainly the highest priority of those projects. Fuel tank replacement, Bill Hodel, since I asked Bill to join me, maybe Bill, do you want to talk about fuel tanks briefly?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Barely.
Okay. I just want to back up a minute with regard to Narragansett and just let the council know that currently, as we speak, the solar panels are being installed. So, John, if you haven't seen it already, there's a big operation going on there now.
Yeah, I saw they're in the parking lot. My wife told me she saw them and they're installing them soon. That's great.
Yes, yes. So currently the district has 15 underground storage tanks for the boilers. 11 of those 15 are at the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. Some of them are just sitting in the ground with unspent fuel because the school has already been converted over to gas. So those tanks would come out permanently and be filled in with earth. The other tanks that are in use would be removed and installed above ground as opposed to putting them in the ground. So we have 11 of these tanks, which we need to do in the next calendar year. That's what this is in front of you for 11 tanks to have them removed or replaced above ground.
Hey, Bill, it's Tom Livingston. I know you guys are trying to bring natural gas in where you can. So have you taken that into account when you're deciding to replace these tanks?
We have, and in fact, we made a third inquiry just in the past 10 days to our lead person at Eversource, and she has again indicated that no time soon will we be receiving gas in the 11 locations.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next project is the Silver Mine driveway improvements. This was a project that came from the school community at Silver Mine, where Silver Mine is now a dual language at all grade levels. It used to be dual language only at half of the school was dual language. It's being converted over. They still have a few more grade levels to go. We're doing one grade each year. So we have a very difficult situation with the driveway there in terms of having too many cars and buses trying to get through the same relatively narrow and short driveway. And parents are reporting that it takes some cases more than an hour to go in and pick up their child in the afternoon. And so this project would design a new entryway into the lower parking lot and reconfigure the traffic pattern so that there'd be less competition between the buses and the cars. And I believe that the mayor's recommendation, if I understand it correctly, was to fund the design work in the first year. The expectation that the construction probably wouldn't be able to be undertaken this summer anyway. And I would agree that that's probably the case. So, we're appreciative of the recommendation to fund the design work there.
Hey, Tom, that $1.5 million, is that based on on piggybacking on the city's DPW paving contract?
Yes, we do piggyback on the city's paving contract, although this work is going to have to first be designed. This is not just simply repaving and restriping the existing lot, but for a number of years now, we have been not only piggybacking on DPW, but actually turning over these projects, the paving projects to DPW, and they've been really very helpful and very supportive in terms of you know, because they have the expertise in this area, and they've been extremely helpful to the Board of Ed.
If I might add, Henry Dackworth, CFO. In the first year, the 80,000 is just for design. Alan Lowe has looked into this and said his estimate is that this can be done for about $1 million. So we're putting 80,000 in for this year, and I believe we put $1 million for the subsequent year, with the expectation that that would deal with the complete construction.
Great. Okay, back to you, Tom.
Okay. Let's see. I think we're up to the air conditioning program. Bill, would you just touch on that briefly?
Sure. Last summer, we started a program to temper or air conditioning the schools that are lacking that feature. And we completed 1.5 schools. That is all of Kendall and half of Rowton. So this is an ongoing request, which we'd like to do up to 2 schools per year. I think we have a total of 10. So 1.5 is down, and the remaining ones we'd like to do over the next couple of years. This year, we'd like to finish Rowton and also complete air conditioning in its entirety at Silvermine.
So this is for those schools that are either don't already have central air, which is most of them, or schools where we are not doing a major renovation as new or new construction, because obviously Cranberry as new construction would be fully air conditioned. The Jefferson School, when that is renovated as new, that will be fully air conditioned. The Honus project is one of the components of that, has been air conditioning. So we are putting in full central air conditioning on when we're doing a major project. But this appropriation is for those schools where we don't have a major construction or renovation going on. We think it's important to get some level of air conditioning, at least in the classrooms in all of our schools, because all of our schools are now used during the summer. We have summer school at all of our school locations. In fact, this summer we will likely be, if we're allowed into the buildings, be providing, enhanced or expanded summer school programs with potentially more students, and for some students, perhaps more weeks. So we see this really as a permanent feature in terms of providing learning over the summer, because summer school is one of the key ways that we use to try to narrow the achievement gap. So summer school, extra time provided in instruction to our students, is what educators refer to as a tier 3 intervention. And so this is one of the ways that help students who may have fallen behind to help them catch up. The next, if unless there's any questions, I'll go on to the asbestos abatement program. Again, Bill, maybe you want to talk a little bit about asbestos abatement.
Yes, unfortunately, a large majority of our schools have vinyl asbestos tile. We have asbestos around piping, in some cases in ceilings and walls. In this case, we started a program a couple of years ago, and we do a little every summer. We've completed a few schools, and this is a continuation of that program. I see requests of this nature coming in every year until the schools are roughly hazmat free, if you will. This is all in accordance to the state mandated asbestos management program, by where we alert the state of where the asbestos is, and we provide the state with a schedule as to when it will be removed over a period of time. So again, this is a continuation of our asbestos management program and the removal process.
Okay. If any questions on that? If not, I'll move on. Ponus Furniture is one that the mayor has not recommended funding. That is an issue that we do have coming from our school community in terms of outdated and obsolete furniture. Obviously, we understand, that budget decisions have to get made and priorities, have to be assigned. So I'll just move on at this point. Curriculum, materials and books, the 450,000 that has been recommended is an amount that our curriculum department has indicated they can work with, and this is funding essential curriculum materials that are part of the rollout. When we roll out new curriculum, brand new curriculum, a whole new math curriculum for the middle school, something like that, this becomes something that we incorporate into the capital budget. If it's, regular routine replacements, that's in the board's operating budget, but these are really for the implementation of new major curriculum initiatives that cut across the district and across multiple schools. Brian McMahon, indoor air quality and indoor air quality generally is an issue that we've had in the district. Bill, you want to speak to this for just a moment?
Now more than ever, we take this very seriously. Yes, there are some ongoing issues that we are encountering, especially at Brian McMahon. So this is just a continuation of that program. We feel we can easily spend this $100,000 very, very quickly, just in a hazmat cleanup situation. So again, this is part of our ongoing project. I suspect we might have more requests moving forward.
Okay. The next one is enhancement to school security. This is to provide improved security at the high schools where we need the ability to lock down common areas, cafeterias, gymnasiums, other auditoriums, other large spaces in the event of an emergency situation, and also replace entry systems. We put in fob-based entry systems into all of our schools except the high schools, and we need to have improved security access in the high schools. So this appropriation would address that concern.
So here's an item that has been value engineered out a number of years ago, but very much needed. All of the schools, minus the two largest schools, have card access. And without that, you cannot lock down appropriately, as Tom mentioned. So this is very much appreciated.
And I guess the last one that has funding in here is instructional technology. Ralph Allen Cece had a family emergency tonight, wasn't able to join the meeting, but this is to fund technology items in the Board of Ed IT department.
Tom, I had a quick question before we get to that. Just real quick, the school district paving you had requested, you made no request for that this year. And was that because all this paving and all this new construction and renovations include financing in it?
Yeah, it was mostly in recognition of the request for the 1.5 million for the Silvermine driveway, which obviously part of that would involve repaving the driveway. So we thought that to also request the paving appropriation request would be kind of asking for something twice, if you will. We have gotten money in the past from the city. I think it was about $350,000 a year, and we have repaved the parking lots and driveways at several of the schools, but there still are a number of schools that that we need to get to because It's both an ADA issue because when we go in there and do this, the DPW has also been very good about going in and making sure that necessary curb cuts and other ADA compliance issues are addressed at the same time. But again, given all of the other priorities, it can certainly wait another year.
I know you guys have tackled the worst of the worst, being Merrimack, I believe it was Cranberry, Columbus, I believe. And then I know, the ones that were in the worst conditions, but I believe there was some work needed at Cranberry School that was, kind of top of that list. I don't know, Bill, if you can chime in. I remember you were a part of all that when we were working through that during the last couple budget cycles.
Absolutely, and Fox Run is also on that list. I would think after Silver Mine, I think the next school that desperately needs it is West Rocks.
West Rocks. Did Cranberry get done? I can't remember.
Cranberry did get done probably in 2017.
Okay, that's okay. In Columbus, I believe as well. That was pretty good.
That was the first school we did.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
So I think that pretty much runs through all the Board of Ed projects.
Tom, this is Tom again. On the I guess is it instructional technology? How does that relate, if at all, to the recent purchases of Chromebooks and the like for the kids?
Well, some of the items that are in there would have been replacement of Chromebooks. There are some other items that were in there that were not related to the Chromebooks. So there were a few items in there that, and I unfortunately don't have the list right in front of me. Ralph Valancisi would know it off the top of his head, but there were, I do recall there was one item in there related to security, and I believe there was some network upgrade work in there, and I believe there was some phone system adjustments or phone system upgrade in conjunction with the city in there. But certainly a sizable portion of that would have been for Chromebooks, and the special capital appropriation, which is, it did receive approval from the Board of Estimate. Was that earlier this week? I'm losing track of time.
Yeah.
But it's received approval from the Board of Estimate and is winding its way through the approval process. So certainly a portion of that 500,000 would be not needed. Now, with that said, I readily admit, because I'm sure if I don't, Mr. Dakowitz will probably jump in anyway. It's our understanding that as this capital budget goes through, that there may be a recommendation coming forward to eliminate this 500,000 for this year in recognition of this other large, special capital appropriation that is coming through independently. And so we're aware of that, and Ralph Valancisi is aware of that, and he is working, to find alternatives to fund the items that he needs to fund. So he's going to be, looking in his operating budget and anywhere else he can to see what he can do. So, so I guess what I'm saying is we're sort of expecting that there may be a recommendation coming down to remove that 500,000 for next year. And, we understand that.
So how does that work? I mean, if we approve this capital budget with this number in it, how does it work to drop it out?
I have a couple of reconciliation schedules I'd like to go through. John, if you go down, we might have those schedules underneath the capital projects. Keep going. No, next slide. No, next slide.
No.
Is it in front of those 5 slides, possibly?
No.
I don't think we got it.
I don't think we got it either. Before this is the mayor's summary of the capital budget.
Okay, let me then just verbalize it.
Or we can allow you to share your screen if you have it.
No, I haven't. I mean, I guess I could try to pull it up.
Your fault.
Hang on. Let me see if I can pull up it on the screen.
Sabrina, do you mind letting, can you get Henry to allow him to share his screen if you're still on?
Since he's a panelist, he's allowed to.
Oh, okay.
He just goes to the bottom. He should see the button. Henry, let me know if you don't have that.
Thank you.
Okay.
John, I believe you need to stop sharing your screen so that Henry can share his.
No, let me, hang on. Let me go to everything.
There.
Okay. Here we go. Now I have to get back into the meeting somehow. Hang on. Okay, and the button says share screen. Now I have to share one of these screens. How'd I do? Can everyone see this?
Great job.
I wish I could do finance as well as this, but okay, we'll do the best we can. So one of the things I discovered this year as I went through the budget process, I inherited a whole bunch of authorized projects that were not bonded yet. And what I learned is there's a disconnect, a timing disconnect. As I might have mentioned previously, especially now with very low interest rates, I'd love to borrow all the money we needed for the next 5 years. The IRS has strict rules when you're borrowing money on a tax-free basis, and they require, in a bit of a summary, that you must borrow the money in a way that you spend it down under special requirements, somewhere between 3 and 5 years. So consequently, we have all these authorized projects, but what's very important to me is the actual cash flow. When will we be spending the actual money? So we had maybe a Columbus school, but maybe that gets delayed. We may have a project. A good example are the school projects with tens of millions of dollars to be spent. But because of the timing, as Tom indicated today, for example, the Norwalk High School, we approve it today so that it's on the list for the state of Connecticut such that we might be approved for a reimbursement plan. During that first year, at most, we might be spending $50,000 or $75,000 on design. If we are approved, and if we have the bonding authority, then a year later, we would start real construction. And that might take 2 or 3 years. So we might borrow over a period of years. So I designed a schedule to try to link the authorizations that we're looking at in the current year to how much do I expect to borrow this coming year, and how much have I deferred to future years. Then I have a schedule. In essence, it's a little bit of using up our future borrowing capacity with today's authorizations. So I feel it's imperative that we keep track of that, because eventually we're bumping up against our debt ceiling. So this first schedule is a reconciliation of our current capital budget to how much we're going to borrow in fiscal year 21 or the deferral. And as I indicated before, we may be authorizing on a gross level, because that's one of the requirements the state has to consider projects for reimbursement. But I have to focus on how much actual borrowing will the city have to incur. So for this year, we have the police at 14 million, no revenue. And Deputy Chief Zecca said this was the radio system primarily that we negotiated with our vendor, where we could pay half in fiscal year 21 and half in the subsequent year. So therefore, this coming year, we would need to borrow 7.6 and 6.5 in the subsequent years. Fire, there's no revenue. We have to borrow it for the coming year. That's when we expect the expense. DPW, we have 26.253 gross requests. We expect low SIP of 750,000 and 4.6 million of other revenues, mostly state grants, for a total revenue of 5.4 million. The net borrowing to us is 20.9 million, which I expect in the current year. WPCA, from my perspective, if they want to borrow 3750, they borrow it themselves because they are an independent authority and an enterprise fund. So that does not impact the city's borrowing. Economic and community development, 5.4 minus 1.2 revenue. So we need to borrow 4.3. That's the 4.3 this coming year. Community services, redevelopment, IT, it's a straight shot. We need to borrow it this coming year. So on the city side, we have a net bonding need of 40.8 million, of which 34 million I expect to borrow this coming year, and 6.5, in this case, I know it's the one subsequent year, it would be fiscal year 22. Now I look at the Board of Ed projects. Obviously, the two big ones are the high school and Cranberry. So looking at the net amount after expected revenue, the high school is at 225 minus 175, assuming we get 80% bonding. That 50 million, I do not expect to need this coming year, because at best case, we're just doing design work. So that's 50.3 million. And then I made some assumptions about how will that construction proceed on a cash flow basis. Same thing with Cranberry. The gross amount approved is 45, but we expect a reimbursement of 14.6 million, a net bonding requirement of 30.4. Again, not for this coming year. I assumed all other Board of Ed projects, which are 7.5 million, no revenue offset, had to be borrowed for this coming year. Tom, you talked about the 500,000. We can juggle what we need, but this is a starting point. So in total, the authorization is 153.8 million gross. After expected revenue, we need to borrow 129. I worked with our financial advisor. I believe I've made presentations in the past that said, we cannot just borrow an unlimited fashion. We're looking at 42 million per year in new borrowings for the next 5 years, each year. And that's all we can afford. 87 million has to be deferred to future years. The next spreadsheet is as follows. Here's our bonding capacity. Where does that come from? Right now, our bonds outstanding, debt outstanding, is approximately $260 million. In discussions with our financial advisor and analyses, we have determined approximately 400 million is the limit we can borrow and still maintain a AAA bond rating. It's a very complex calculation. When they evaluate the bond ratings, the gross amount of debt is one factor. They also look at the debt service as a percentage of operating expenses. Obviously, as we borrow more, our debt service will be higher. Right now, we have record low interest rates. We have to make assumptions about the growth of the operating budget. So there are a lot of moving variables, and we've come up with a target of $400 million. We currently have debt service where we repay 20 million, about 20 million of debt each year. So we are allowed to replace that with new borrowings, and our total debt outstanding would not be increased. Additionally, I took the additional $140 million from our 260 to our $400 million ceiling. And I said, let's get there over a 10-year period, but I front-end loaded it. So I said, we could afford an additional $20 million per year for 5 years and approximately 8 to 10 million for the next 5 years. And then we're at 400 million. Therefore, this 42.9 million is a total of the 22.9 million that we will be paying down this current year based on our interest payments, our debt service. That 22.9 can be replaced, plus the additional 20, which is the runway to get to 400 million for a maximum borrowing of, 41.7. Okay, same calculation, the numbers are a little bit lower. When I take that 41.7, I first have to say how much of the old authorized projects that have not been bonded need to be bonded. I did a survey. I start with Alan Lowe and Jim Giuliano, and I say, okay, you're in charge of all the school projects. What are we really spending this coming year? And then I talked to every single department and said, you have authorized projects out there. What is your cash flow? And I determined that we were looking at a $10 million number. I reduced this to 5.9 as a method to get and stay within the 41.7 limit that we had established. Going forward, we are looking from 21 to 30 at $118 million of previously authorized capital projects before we got to fiscal year 21 that have not yet been bonded. And I put it out over a 10-year period, and that's where we are for right now. New projects authorized net in the current year, that's $129 million. We also are closing out, we have an existing Norwalk High School project Tom alluded to, and said if we're going to build a new high school, no sense continuing the existing project. If we close that out, that's a reduction of what we need. So we're looking at 128.9 million in funding that we would require. The red numbers are reductions in the current year, upcoming fiscal year 2021, which I then put on the schedule, laying it out for future years. So Cranberry School 30.4, I assume we have a design, 3 million, and then we have 9, 12, 6. We get to a $30 million total, but nothing in the current year, and it's laid out in the future. Similarly, Norwalk High School, I took away the 50 million and said, let's say it's 5 million, 5 million, 20, and 20. Those would be the heavy construction years between getting authorization from the state legislature, making sure we get 80% reimbursement. The heavy construction would be in 24 and 25. The combined dispatch radio system, Assistant Chief Zecca negotiated that, so we flipped 6.5 to the coming year. Library expansion, $26 million. I'm looking at 4.9 in 22, 11.5 in 23, 10 million in 24. We also have Silvermine driveway, the 1 million, not 1.5 million, and the 3.5 for Narragansett. Okay, those deductions of 87.2 get us into the $41.7 million limit. And it's tight, okay? Let's look at the next couple of years. My maximum with the new 20 million per year, 42, 43, 42, 41. After I add up what's already in the program, and I had to put a 0 for authorized but not yet bonded, future bonding reserved, 38, 39, 42, 40.5. Literally, we have less than 5 million a year for the next 2 years and less than 1 million the 2 years after. All of the authorized projects have used up 5 years of borrowing capacity. Consequently, what really needs to be done is an examination of all those projects that have been authorized in the past, authorized this year, authorized in future years, and tough decisions have to be made. Here are our choices. We say certain projects will not get done. We say certain projects will be slimmed down in scope with a smaller budget, or we can stretch out the projects using time as our friend, saying, in order to do everything, we have to use time, okay? The only other alternative would be giving up the AAA bond rating. So the summary message is, we were able to get through this 2021 fiscal year, authorizing everything, bonding up to the limit, but we are using up our future capacity at a very, very quick rate. And some very tough decisions have to be made in the next couple of years. At the same time, I would just emphasize that the operating budget will also be under tremendous pressure, okay? We had market losses on our pension plan. Therefore, the contribution we will be required to make to the pension plan will increase. This year, this coming year, we are drawing down $8 million from our rainy day fund. It was anticipated that we would not do that again. That was one time so that we got under 15%. With all the COVID expenditures, that's going to have to be paid from that rainy day fund. So we have to compensate that also in the operating budget. We also have a major recession that we're into, and people are under pressure. And so we also, on the operating budget side, want to try to limit the mill rate increases. So finance is like the balloon. You can only stretch in a couple of directions. And if you pull in one side, you have to accommodate on the other. So I know we're here to talk about the capital budget. I hope this explains the budgetary reality, which says, I'm ready to go. As soon as the bond markets calm down, I want to grab these low interest rates. There are only two things that affect our debt service: the amount that we borrow and the interest rate we get. The amount that we borrow, I almost have to follow this schedule, but at least let me borrow at lowest rates. And with our AAA bond rating, our rainy day fund, our good financial management in the past 6-7 years, we will be able to get a deal done at very attractive rates. I've talked to the experts in the financial markets. There are localities that cannot come to market at any price. And there are localities that if they do come to market, they will pay a much higher price than the rates. Okay, I don't have to tell you, cities, counties, and states are under pressure across the country. We are in a unique position. We can go to the markets, we can borrow these funds, and we can probably get excellent rates. But these are the challenges we have going forward. I hope this addressed your questions. I'll answer any others. John, you're on mute if you're speaking.
My apologies. Yeah, thank you, Henry, for that detailed explanation. Anyone have any questions for Henry?
Yeah, Henry, Tom again. Just looking at these numbers. So you're saying that even something like our typical $5 million annual paving budget is problematic.
Let me go back because I was shocked also. Let me go back to sort of what we need to borrow. Here's 20.9 million DPW. Now, a lot of that is the flood mitigation and special projects, which are not annual, but historically, and Tom can confirm, we've been borrowing in the $15 million range. Maybe it's 15 to 20 lately. And that's sort of our ongoing expenditures. Over the last 4 to 5 years, we've been authorizing much more for the school construction project. And I went through all the numbers. We started with the demographic study, and we need this, and it's very well laid out and thought out. And that's why last year I borrowed $50 million, and I'm looking at the 42. We need that money. Everyone explained to me we underinvested for many years. All the schools are getting old at the same time. It would have been lovely if every 2-3 years we did a project. We didn't. We're catching up. Schools are a great investment. I get it. The problem is everybody has a need and a wish list. They're all wonderful. But the problem is, look at this line item, authorized but not yet bonded, $118 million. I think that has to be re-examined, especially after COVID. I think going forward, just like we put all these authorized projects in there, the easiest way to work through this is by stretching things out, by using this last chart and filling in the years and saying, you know what? We can't accept only 4.8 million. We need 15 million for internal city. So 10 million of these other projects have to be pushed or slimmed down or not done. And you keep doing that, pushing things forward, staying under the ceiling. Now again, the problem, what was the rainy day fund for? I said, you have a recession, it'll come. When? No one knew. But during a recession, you can't increase the mill rate that much. So you stretch things out, you push it out, you make do. I'll go with a specific example of new furniture at the Pona School. And people pointed out to me, when people move, they take their existing furniture with them. Much of it is usable, okay? I think when the mayor went through the proposals, he did the same thing. Yes, I know you'd like to get new cars, but the cars are working. Until they don't work, we have to keep using them. I know it's the end of the useful life, but you know what? Just because it's fully depreciated in accounting land that Tom and I do, doesn't mean it's not workable. We have to learn to use what we have, make it stretch, be very smart on acquisition and constructions, and stretch this thing out. And maybe with new eyes, we say, we just can't afford to do some of this stuff. And some of it, we've got to do less than what we planned, okay? A lot of these projects over the last couple of years were done during some very good times. We had 12 years of growth. And I just say, you re-examine the old projects, the current ones, be scrupulous about the future, and fill in the chart. We fill in the chart, we do okay. We get above 400 million, we're down a very unsafe path. We now lose a bond rating, interest costs more, and what are we financing? Are we getting a return on investment? But if the grand list grows because we're doing well after the recession, and with the increased grand list, we can afford to have lower mill rate increases, some of that can translate into capital projects. So it's a very dynamic, complex interrelationship. We can do it. I'm here to be the early warning system. Think about it. We did okay with COVID right now in this year's budget. Knock on wood, we're doing okay. We're looking forward to next year's budget, but you really have to be careful and cautious as we go forward.
All right, Henry, thank you. And you know you're home, Henry. You can take off the tie. It's fine.
You know I'm not wearing pants, right? This is
Okay, if there are no more comments, questions, I am going to.
Well, John, sorry, one thing. I just want to go back to my earlier question that I think prompted some of this, which is that $500,000 for technology for the Board of Education, which Tom is suggesting they probably don't need. Should we deal with it now, or how will it be dealt with?
Let me say, I didn't say we don't need it. I said we understood that it was.
Never heard those words out of your mouth, Tom.
Approved.
I would just say, both on the operating budget side and the capital side, I've designed this. I mean, we go bottom up from every department, every project, trying to get an understanding. But as we operate, we have flexibility. And there are times when, and I have to say again, when I went through the operating budget, 90% of the people were on the program. They said, you know, we spent it 2 years ago, but we don't need it in the future. Take it out of my budget. But here's what we really do need. I expect that full cooperation. Tom and I have a good professional relationship, despite what you hear in the press. And we tend to collaborate and tend to agree on a lot of stuff. And especially, he's had decades of experience in government. He's been in my role. He understands the city side and the school side. We're all in this together to try to make Norwalk terrific. We have financial limitations, and we're going to work together. If it makes sense and we can shave some money here, there, or anywhere, we do that. There have been special requests for the Board of Ed during COVID. The mayor has stepped up immediately to accommodate, and often Tom and I work out the details of how we get the money, how do we account for it, how do we get reimbursed as best we can. But the goal is the same. And if that 500,000 is subsumed in something that we gave them subsequently, obviously we'll take that out and we will revise these schedules accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
You're welcome.
Okay. Going once, going twice. Any other questions before we go call for a vote? Okay. I can't remember. It's been so long. Did someone move the item?
I can move it, John.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Okay, I would first like to propose an amendment. That amendment being to take $40,000 from, I apologize, the lettering is so small here on my backup. I believe it's C.
John, I can help if you want.
Yeah, I got like a very small paper. It's under transportation, mobility, and parking.
Right.
Under
It's
transportation master plan.
It's coming from C0514 to C0650.
Okay. So if there are no issues and that was understood correctly, I'm moving $40,000, make an amendment to move $40,000 from transportation master plan to the item, the fleet equipment item. Would someone like to move? I guess no, I'll call for a vote for the amendment and I will do a roll call vote. So Mr. Sirenides.
Yes.
Miss Shanahan's not here, nor is
Ms. Smith back?
Barbara. No, she's not back. Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Keegan.
Just a question, please. This is on your amendment only?
Yes, this is on the amendment only.
Yes.
Who's still left? Who else we got here?
Me.
Oh, Mr. Livingston.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion passes. Now we'll call for a vote for the item as amended. Mr. Livingston.
Yes.
Oh, I voted yes as well. Let the record show. Mr. Livingston.
Yes.
Mr. Sirenides.
Yes.
Mrs. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Keegan.
This is on moving the whole budget to the common council, is that correct?
That is correct.
No.
Okay, so let the record show 3 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passes.
John, did you vote?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I apologize. I vote. This whole electronic system is a little confusing. So that's 4 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passes. And Mr. Livingston, do you mind texting Mrs. Smith?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
That we're moving on. All right, thank you all. All right, moving on to Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. Approve scheduling a public hearing on the 220 NAA Tax Credit Program application to be held during the June 4th, 20 Planning Committee meeting. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Sirenides. Who would like to quickly speak to that? Just give us a summary of the item.
I can, John. This is Brian Bedoli.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, how's it going? So just inform everyone that applications are now available for the Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program. It's effectively a tax credit the state of Connecticut offers to business firms to make cash investment in community programs. And effectively for the procedural aspects of it, we need to have a public hearing at the June 4th Planning Committee meeting.
Okay, great. I'm just going to call all in favor vote on that. All in favor of moving that just say yes.
Yes.
No? Any no's? Any abstentions? Okay, let the record show that the item was unanimously approved. Is Barbara back? No?
Yes.
Hey, Barbara.
Yes, and I have to say, it was very nice to be able to go and sit in my living room instead of out in the hall.
Yeah, one of the benefits of these Zoom meetings, you're in the comfort of your own home. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Let's go down to where we need to be. Okay, next item up is Enterprise Zone, item 2C1, approve the advancement of the expansion of the Enterprise Zone ordinance to include Census Tract 437 to the Ordinance Committee of the Common Council. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, briefly, I know we've had two meetings that was focused on the Enterprise Zone. I know it's been a while due to the effects of COVID-19, but here we are. And there have been some questions. I've had a lot of back and forth with many today. I know there was when I guess back in 2010, when the Enterprise Zone was expanded, that there was a 10-year summary that needs to be addressed and then go through the proper channels for approval, both on the city level and the state level. And Jessica Casey's with us tonight, and she'd like to speak to that to get that ball rolling, and hopefully we can get this thing moved to the Ordinance Committee and get the ball rolling on that. So Jessica, are you still with us?
I am.
Okay, do you mind giving the committee an update and a summary of what we spoke about?
No problem at all. If you could take your screen down, then I can share my screen. I did a PowerPoint.
Oh, great. Look at you. Okay, stop share. Okay, you're good to go.
Great. Let me just. Okay, great. Can everyone see the screen? Excellent. So we had a couple questions pop up about the enterprise zone in addition to what John had just said. So we wanted to provide an information deck to address those questions and also to address development since 2009. So we're going to walk through the goal of the enterprise zone, revisit criteria, revisit the qualified census tracts, talk about the existing enterprise zone, the proposed expansion, and then next steps. So just as a reminder, the Enterprise Zone program is a program where an area in which local tax incentives are offered to encourage business investment and jobs for residents in disadvantaged census tracts. And the way in which that's measured is a criteria where the census tract needs to meet one of three criteria: 25% or more below the poverty, people below the poverty level, 25% or more of the families receiving public assistance or welfare income, employment rate at least 200% of the state's average. So it needs to hit one of those three criteria. And just as a point of information, which you've seen before, but in Connecticut, there are 17 municipalities that have enterprise zones. So one of the things that we did look at as part of the enterprise zone program was what census tracts would meet one of the following criteria. And we specifically looked in the urban core. But we can see that 0 out of the 8 census tracts highlighted meet that criteria, although 437, which is the Wall Street West Ave area, is close at 24.2. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria is that 4 of the 8 census tracts highlighted meet the criteria, which is 25% or more of the families receiving public assistance or welfare income. And the third is that 7 out of 8 of the census tracts highlighted meet the criteria of unemployment being at least 200% of the state's average. So what you see on the map on the right is that these are the census tracts outlined in red that meet at least one of the 3 criteria that would be designated as eligible census tracts. So when we look at the existing enterprise zone, it includes census tracts 441 and 445. The north boundary is I-95. The boundary on the east side is the MLK. The south boundary is a little bit wonky. It doesn't actually follow a roadway. And then the east boundary follows the waterfront, but it goes to Mack Street or Burritt Ave and then along Woodward Ave to Dock. So it's a little bit of a strangely configured census tract boundary on the right side or the east side, but wanted to just give an overview for the purposes of a reminder of what the existing enterprise looks like. So we wanted to give a little bit more information about what we've seen since 2009. And part of this is the 10-year look back that John was looking at. And so since 2009, South Norwalk has seen 10 major developments. They include Ironworks, the Pearl, 19 Day Street, Sono Collection, the Sono Residence Inn. The apartments the developments are fairly diverse. So there are apartments, but also mixed use, residential, retail, and hotel. The developments represent more than $100 million in appraised value, more than 2.7 million square feet in development, and more than 330 residential units. That's just within the existing enterprise zone, as you saw in Census Tract 441 and 445. Of the 10 projects, 3 have been awarded the enterprise zone program: the Ely Ave project, the Ironworks project, and the Sono Residence Inn. But it's important to note that eligible projects that are in the process of being awarded include Sono Collection and 19 Day Street. Those have not been awarded as of yet, but they are in the process. So if we look more specifically at the 3 projects that got approval, We have the Ely Avenue project. So this is a residential project. It began receiving enterprise zone credits in 2010. Previously, the parcel was vacant and the land generated about $2,500 annually in taxes. And over the course of the 7-year phase-in, the value of the tax abatements totaled around $50,000. But now the units are bringing in more than $25,000 in annual property taxes each year, which represents a 1,000% increase in the taxes between 2010 and 2018. When we look at the second project that received approval through the Enterprise Zone program, we're looking at Ironworks, and it began receiving Enterprise Zone credits in 2016. So the property was once assessed at $3 million. It's now being assessed at nearly $30 million. Between 2007 and 2012, the property generated about $50,000 a year in property taxes, or about $300,000 over the 6 years leading into construction. In the first year, which was the highest tax abatement year, the property owner paid about $50,000 in taxes, which is just as much as it had paid during construction or previous to construction. But in 2008, the property tax paid with the enterprise zone abatement was $374,000. And this represents an increase in taxes of 1,129% since 2007. After 7 years, instead of $300,000 in taxes, the property will bring in about $4.9 million. And the third that we're going to look at is the Residence Inn. So the Residence Inn was awarded in 2018. The property was assessed at less than $1 million, and it now has an assessment of $15.6 million. From 2007 to 2013, the two parcels generated roughly around $17,000 a year, or about $120,000 across the 5-year time period. In the first year, which was the highest tax abatement year, the property owner paid about $48,000 in taxes. And in 2017, the taxes for the property were $13,000. So an increase of 262% has been realized between 2017 and 2018. Since 2007 and 2018. In the 3 years, the property taxes will have more than covered what there was previously. But in addition to that, the hotel is operating before the COVID-19 pandemic at around 80% occupancy, meaning more than 400 people are staying in the hotel each and every night in Sono, which is what we would like the enterprise zone to do. So if we were to look at Census Tracts 441 and 445, which are the enterprise zone, and look at a snapshot from 2010 to 2018, we can see that the population's increased by 13%, that families in poverty have dropped by 17%, unemployment rate has dropped by 7%, the median household income has increased by 49%, and households that receive cash, including public assistance or SNAP, has decreased by 9%. And these are all census-related numbers from the American Communities Survey between 2010 and 2018. So this brings us to talking about the proposed expansion and the geography. So 441, 445 are the existing enterprise zone. And I put 444 in there just because it was eligible, but it's not, that isn't the enterprise zone currently. When we look at the expansion that we're talking about, it's 437, which is the Wall Street West Ave area. And if we were to look at demographic information between 2010 and 2018, we would see that the population's increased by 22%, the families in poverty has increased by 1%, unemployment rates decreased by 3%, median household incomes increased by 45%, and the households that receive public assistance or SNAP has decreased by 3%. But I put an asterisk beside the 22% population growth because we've seen that the Waypoint development has increased the residential units in the area by almost 700. And if we were to look at 700 units of residential and an increase there, and we times it by 2, then we're seeing the 22% increase, but a large percentage of that increase is actually based on the development that's happened since 2010. So when we apply the criteria for the enterprise zone to the Wall Street West Ave area, we know that the Wall Street West Ave area hits the criteria for 2 out of 3 of the eligible items. So when we talk about the percentage of individuals below poverty, it does not, because it's below the 25%. But for a percentage of families who receive public assistance or welfare income, it's at 33.5. So that hits the criteria. And the unemployment rate is 8.6, which also hits the criteria.
Hey, Jess, it's Tom. I'm just thinking in terms of what's going on now in the COVID and unemployment and all that. Do you have any sense of how that would affect this, if at all?
So the unemployment rate, it may affect because the state's unemployment rate has very likely gone up. But in addition to that, it could be that the percentage of families who receive public assistance and welfare income also goes up.
Also goes up, right.
So you would only need to hit, you'd hit one of the 3 criteria. So even if unemployment rate was a no, it's very likely that the percentage of families who receive public assistance would still qualify as yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I think it brings up a really good point, because with what we're seeing with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a real opportunity for us to think of the economic development tools that have worked effectively in other areas of Norwalk, right? So when we look at the projects in South Norwalk, we have 10 major projects that have happened since 2009. When we look at the major projects that have happened in Wall Street West Ave since 2009, we have 2 projects. And I think that, we want to ensure that Wall Street West Ave has the same economic development tools and the same opportunity that other areas in Norwalk have. And so if we can apply the enterprise zone program to Wall Street West Ave, especially during this time, it will act as a catalyst to bring in that private investment that we so badly need. So this slide you've seen before, but I wanted to put it up again because it shows the short-term, medium-term, and long-term opportunities in the Wall Street West Ave area for development. And in the short term, we're looking at between 1 to 3 years. We're talking about the Lohman site, the YMCA, Wall Street Place, High Point, and the Norwalk Public Library. For medium, we're talking about Yankee Doodle Block, the Pulse Point, the head of the Harbor North, and Smith Street. And for long term, we're talking about the library block, the Lillian August site, AutoZone, medical offices, CVS, Dunkin' Donuts. So a lot of retrofitting or redevelopment on sites that already have buildings. When we look at short term, as I said, 1 to 3 years, medium term is more 3 to 6 years, and then longer term is probably 6 to 10 years. But this is really the opportunity. We know that the enterprise zone program is by right. We also know that although it's by right in South Norwalk, we've seen 10 major developments, and yet only 3 have used the enterprise zone for an abatement. So I wanted to provide a little bit of that information for you to answer some of the questions that have come through, but also to give you a little bit of a better snapshot of what's happened in the enterprise zone since 2009 for Census Tract 441 and 445. So tonight we're seeking action from the Planning Committee to move the proposed enterprise zone expansion to Ordinance Committee, but there is still a lot of work to do for the Ordinance Committee. And I think I wanted to lay them out here so that everyone was aware of what still needs to be addressed. One is we need to update the language to create consistency between the state statute and the local statute. The second is we're recommending that we add a sunset clause for the full enterprise zone program. Third is that we would propose to add the additional geography, which is Census Tract 437. And then the fourth is that we have to notify the DCD commissioner of the proposed changes. So there is a requirement from a procedural standpoint to be able to request approval from the state agency DCD to be able to have the expansion take place. But we want to make sure that at the local level, we have the support and the approvals in place before we seek the state's approval for that expansion. And that's all.
Jessica, do you see any issues with the state's approval? How do you, I know you can't predict the future, but do you see any difficulties with getting the state's approval once, and if this gets the stamp of approval from the city?
I don't see that problem for two reasons. One, the state's been pretty adamant that development needs to be deserving of any abatements or any credits that it gets. And so when we think of the enterprise zone as being a catalyst for development and a catalyst for jobs and a catalyst for residential units, the plan, there needs to be a plan, and it needs to be built for the enterprise zone program to be able to activate. It needs to have a final CO issued before the enterprise program can actually be given. So that's one. But second of all, I think just in the state that we're in from an economic development standpoint or an economy standpoint, I think that now more than ever, the state's going to be looking for municipalities to step up and use the economic tools that they have the ability to adopt to be able to spur economic development in Connecticut. And I think that this is one of those tools.
I agree. If there's ever a time for incentive, now is the time. You mentioned that there were 4 developments that benefited and benefited both, benefited the city. But there was also two that have not received their CO. One being the mall, and I believe there's another property. And I apologize if you made mention of them, but do you have any specifics on what they will generate, excuse me, once online with their CO?
Yeah, so the first project is the Sono collection, which first is Sono collection, and the second is 19 Day Street, which is the development across the road from Washington Village. And we don't know exactly what that will generate. We're not sure. We are not in a position to be able to project the tax revenue that comes through for these projects. It's something that we've talked about before from a city standpoint, but we do not do financial modeling on what projected tax revenue will look like for those. So we do know that Sono collection will be a substantial amount of revenue, and 19 Day will be as well. Given what we've seen with some of the other projects, Ironworks, for example, 19 Day is a smaller project than Ironworks, but right now Ironworks is $373,000 of tax revenue, and that's with the enterprise zone in place.
I make mention of it because I just know going through this recent budget cycle how much the city benefited just from the mall's tax revenue even before they have their CO. I know that pleasant surprise, that additional funding really got us through a real tough time, and it was welcomed. Okay. Any questions for Jessica? No? Okay. Mayor, are you there? I know the mayor wanted to say a few words. I don't know if he's still there.
The mayor is here.
Hey, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Chairman Kites. And first of all, Jessica, thank you. That really, it was brief, but it was very informative presentation. You did an excellent job. I fully support this program. And since my administration has been in office, and many of you have been with me the whole time, we have been looking at ways to incentivize various areas of the city through TIF programs or other tax incentive programs, and certainly the enterprise zone expansion. There's been a lot of misinformation spread out there about tax incentives and how it becomes a burden on homeowners, and it shifts the burden of taxes onto the homeowners, and the homeowners will be subsidizing the developers. None of that is true. I don't know whether there's intentional misinformation or whether people just don't truly understand what a tax incentive program is supposed to accomplish. As you saw, over a few years, there were plots of property that had tax increases of over 1,000%. That increases our tax base. That's an investment in the future. Moreover, as Jessica appropriately put, we are in a situation right now where we have an economic downturn of huge proportions. We do not know what's going to happen to the economy over the next couple of years, but we certainly know we're in a very, very dire situation right now. We're going to be looking for projects and programs that create jobs, that help our economic recovery in the area. And hopefully, a lot of the local contractors will be put to work because they'll be putting new projects and renovating or the census tracts in which we're speaking. You know, we've been looking for a way to jumpstart the Wall Street area. The only project that has moved forward is head of the Harbor North. We know what's happening with Wall Street Place right now, but we need to jumpstart that area that has been struggling since the flood of 1955. I look at this as an investment in the future and putting people to work, helping our local residents by increasing the tax base on the commercial side and reducing the tax base on the residential side. This is something that we should really strongly consider. As I said, I've been pushing incentives, finding ways that we can jumpstart various areas of the community ever since being elected. And as John, you know, you've been here the whole time. Other members of the council have been here the whole time. We know this is a way that we can start moving this forward. We also know that out of all the projects built, as Jessica pointed out, 3 have taken advantage of the enterprise zone, and 2 are going to be taking advantage of the enterprise zone very shortly. So 5 out of 10. But we want to find a way to get people excited. If we don't have some sort of a program, you can mark my word, because of the economic situation, other communities will be looking at tax incentive programs to get people to invest in their community. Some of them are in our surrounding area in Fairfield County already have tax incentive programs. Now, if I'm a developer, if I'm a person who wants to invest in a community, look, I'm investing, I'm not in it to just give money away. I'm in it to make money. And that's okay. It's okay to make money in today's world. So we want them to invest in Norwalk. They're going to make money in Norwalk, but they're also going to build up our infrastructure, build up our grand list, build up our tax base. And it's an investment in our city rather than investing in some other city where they can make more money because the other cities have tax incentive programs. So I strongly encourage the council to move this forward to the ordinance committee. I'll be speaking to the ordinance committee. I strongly will support this program and feel that is the right way to go so that we can start moving our depressed areas forward and hopefully get people to start getting excited about Norwalk again. So thank you, Chairman, for your opportunity. I want to thank the council. Jessica, you did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. And to echo that, I'm not sure of too many things, but I am sure without incentives, that area will never recover to what it was. So thank you all. Okay, I guess if there's no other questions, I will call for a vote. I'll start off with you. I believe, did someone move this? I cannot remember.
I'll move it.
Barbara moved it.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, Mr. Sirenides.
Yes.
Mr. Livingston.
Yes, and I just want to also thank Jessica for a great presentation.
Yes, agreed. Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Keegan.
Yes, and Jessica, thank you for answering all my questions. You helped me make my decision.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith.
Yes, and Jessica, if you could forward that presentation to us, I would appreciate it. It's very well done, very clear, and I appreciate your work.
Great, thank you, will do.
Great. Ms. Young.
Yes. And Jessica, good night. get some rest for you and your little one.
Thanks, Darlene.
And I am also a yes, so the motion passes unanimously. Great. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica.
Okay, before everyone gets into their jammies, we have one more item. If you all remember, Mr. Kleppen wasn't able to complete his presentation due to technical difficulties, and he's been waiting several months to do so. So I believe he's going to be brief, and he will be giving us an update on the East Norwalk train station and the proposed improvements and additional transit-oriented initiatives. So, Mr. Kleppen, are you awake?
Yes, sure.
Yes, there he is. And standing up. Good for you. Good. Okay. Do you have a presentation? Do you want me to go back to the agenda?
What I have a presentation.
Okay, great.
I can get the whole, let me just get the view on the whole screen. 1 sec. Usually F5 works, but it does not work. I'll stroke off this to save
Steve,
time.
I think you want slideshow and then start at the beginning.
All right. Is that under view?
I think it's slideshow, 2 to the left.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, here we go. I'll go quickly. Just to give you an update, the presentation's about 20 slides, so it's really not too long overall. And just a little background, the committee looking at this has been working on the plan for a little over a year now. The draft plan has been done and the oversight committee is discussing it. We had a meeting last night where we went over some items and have another meeting set up for the week after next, which will hopefully get us a little closer to the second draft, which will probably be the draft that gets put out for public view and public comment. This map here just highlights the kind of the overall big picture themes. I'm not going to go into every little detailed nook and cranny recommendation within the plan, but this outlines the major themes, and I'll go through each of the numbers and give a little more explanation to each one. So the first slide you're looking at shows the East Avenue corridor, basically from 95 down south towards Gregory Boulevard area. That area currently is zoned, and this is item number 1 on the slide. This item is currently zoned neighborhood business. We're proposing to rezone it to a new village district, and the village district gives the city the ability to regulate design, and the village district provides developers or applicants the ability to get increased height and increased density in exchange for certain amenities that they give back to the community. And I'll go into those a little bit later. One of the ideas that we're doing with the village district is pulling in the density proposed, the commercial development and the redevelopment closer to the train station and closer to East Avenue, and pulling it away from some of the outlying areas, which I'll also talk about in a little bit. Also on this slide, labeled number 6, there's a small area that we're proposing to do some rezoning within the I-1 zone. And the idea within the I-1 zone is to keep that commercial use, because we're seeing through our outreach and efforts in the beginning of the planning process that there was, and we still think is, a demand for small flex space and manufacturing space in that area. But we're trying to put in some incentives for developers and commercial operators to further monetize their property. So we're trying to come up with a scheme which we think will allow a small amount of residential above those properties while maintaining the commercial use. So we're not giving up any of the commercial use, because our mindset is that the commercial space is needed and will be further needed as we go forward. The other area on here is a small area on the southeast part of that circle, which is also recommending a rezone into the new village district boundary. The next area is kind of the western boundary of the study area. The areas in and around Charles Street and Osborne Avenue, they kind of function as de facto affordable housing. So we've seen some developments in the area recently where some of those housing stock has been turned over, and we would like to see that remain. So we're going to explore the possibility of looking at a facade improvement program in that area, similar to what you talked about tonight with Tammy, that happens through the Redevelopment Agency in South Norwalk. So that's a program we're going to look to see if it has potential to expand in that geography as well. Another idea that came out of the study was looking at the potential to relocate the DPW garage. So this is really what it is in here is a placeholder. It's not to say we need to relocate it. We should do it in any time frame, but it's something that may be in the city's best interest going forward to consider getting that resource away from the water and then look at repurposing that property. We don't have any idea on where that would go or how that would work, but it's just something that in a long-term planning strategy, the city should consider. There are several areas that you'll see highlighted and labeled as number 5. Those areas are currently zoned neighborhood business, and we're recommending that they get rezoned to a residential use. As I mentioned earlier, the idea is we're going to pull the commercial towards the train station, get rid of these little outlier neighborhood business areas. That doesn't mean that any of those properties that are currently business use would lose their designation as business use. They could remain whatever business they're operating under, but if they change to a residential use, they become conforming and could no longer go back to that commercial use.
So Steve, I just want to ask, so that means that the areas in number 5 are not grandfathered in for their.
No, they would be grandfathered in.
Okay.
So if say for example there was a delicatessen on one of the properties, that could continue to operate. But if say at some point in the future they decided to convert it to a residential use, which would be a conforming use, they couldn't go back to that commercial use at a later date.
They couldn't go back.
Correct.
Okay.
The next area that we looked at as part of the study area is the Liberty Square area. What we think we should do with Liberty Square area and also the Cove area, which I'll talk about in a second, is establish a separate village district for those two areas. The idea would be that there be no change in the residential density or height. The idea is to kind of protect the unique character of those areas. So we would establish design guidelines for those areas if there's any redevelopment or infill development that could occur on those properties. As you know, there are some properties in that area that are taken as part of the Walk Bridge program. So if they did redevelop in the future, we want to have a say in how those look and how they fit in with the rest of the area. And again, there's some other areas in there that we propose to rezone from the neighborhood business to the C residential. One exciting idea that's come out of the plan, which is labeled number 8, is the creation of a promenade, which basically abuts the northern part of Vets Park. Kathy Hebert's probably off the call, but they actually had money in their capital budget from a couple of years ago to do a wider sidewalk in that area and possibly look at bike lanes. I've talked with Kathy and Mike Yosik and also a little bit with
I'm
Nick.
here.
Oh, you're there. So the idea
we agreed.
What we've come up with is to to construct a promenade which would connect Sono to the Cove area in East Norwalk. And we think it could be included with amenities such as could be exercise areas. It could be what's shown in one of the pictures there. They have these outdoor gaming areas, or it just could be like areas for public gatherings, maybe small areas for music or something like that. But it would really be a nice amenity and connect people to the water and connect the vitality of South Norwalk to East Norwalk. So the idea is when the plan is ultimately adopted, we'll evaluate that and come up with a more concrete plan on how that redevelops. And hopefully, if the economy can improve, that would be eligible for some grant funding to help with the construction part of that. Next area, which I did mention, and I'll just briefly go over it again, was Cove Avenue area. And that's kind of a unique area. It's kind of one of my favorite areas of the city. It's kind of has that little beach town vibe to it. And we want to kind of protect and ensure that can remain. And so if that property is in that area redeveloped, we want to have a say in the look and character of those. There's no proposal to increase density or increase the height of buildings. It's really as a protection tool for the area. And lastly, I mentioned these, just highlighting a couple different areas on the map, is pulling in some of these outlier properties out along, I believe that's Winfield. My map's a little fuzzy, sorry about that. That, you know, these are kind of outlier commercial areas. And I think it's best in probably a better use of property if those transition from a commercial use to a residential. Some highlights of the new village district zone. There is street activating uses required in the areas in yellow shown on the map. And this may tweak a little bit as the plan further develops. We did talk about this a little bit last night. The applicants are required to provide public realm and open space and also wider sidewalks. Now this would be exclusive of whether they sought to get some higher density or additional height as part of their buildings. If they redevelop the properties, they're going to be required to do these at a bare minimum. In order to get some increased density and increased height, as I mentioned, there are amenities they have to provide. The amenities, if they fully realize those, they can go from the 2.5 stories allowed now to 3.5 stories, and then potentially increase their density from 1 unit for every 1,650 square feet of lot area to 825 square feet of lot area. And the important thing to note about the amenity schedule, which are show up in the next couple slides, is I would not, you know, if you have questions, don't get bogged down on the numbers that are there, because we're still fit testing those and still tweaking these as we go. So the plan itself will have the zoning regulations and a set of design guidelines as an appendix to the plan. And even if when the plan gets adopted, those zoning regulations and design guidelines still have to go through the public approval process separately from the plan. So that they're going to change as we go through. But I think the draft zoning and the draft design guidelines, in my opinion, are a really solid step and will kind of move through the approval process as the planning goes through the process as well. Some of the amenities we looked at were reduced rents for ground floor tenants, because that's been an issue in East Norwalk about filling up space. Green building standards is another one we've looked at. Trying to incentivize adding additional outdoor seating and outdoor gathering spaces. I know that sounds odd talking about that at the moment, but we're hoping this is a post-COVID environment. And some of the ideas and concepts that we're talking about are using a green infrastructure also in conjunction with art, but also as a low impact development process. So we're looking at things that like creative rain gardens, looking at art sculptures, looking at public Wi-Fi, shared seating, kind of amenities which we think will fit in well with the village feel for the area. I did mention this a little bit earlier, within the I-1 zone that runs kind of east-west along the railroad tracks in East Norwalk. We're looking to make sure that those industrial properties remain industrial. We don't want to see those disappear. So what we are looking at is putting in residential as an allowed use on upper floors, provided they keep the underlying ground floor commercial use. Okay, and so one of the things, and we're getting close to the end now, but just one of the things that the consultant did, Harriman, I should mention, is the consultant on the project, but RKG is their economic development sub-consultant. So what we did was we tried to fit test some of these scenarios to say, what would this kind of look like, and is it practical in a real world application? So here is one of the areas we looked at, which is a corner, kind of an odd intersection if you look at it. It's where East Avenue, Gregory Boulevard, Winfield, and Rogers Square all meet there. And there's a gas station on the corner And there's that commercial development that's the like 1-story odd kind of strip. I think there's a laundromat in there now, but I'm sure you've been by it at some point in time. So the consultant looked at a couple redevelopment scenarios with this property to see what would work in terms of if they put in the amenities, what could they realize? And the idea is where there would be a shared parking scenario, and there would be, there'll be another rendering which shows it a little better, but there's a shared parking scenario, a 3.5-story building on one site, a 2.5-story building on another, and some other amenities that the planning committee for this decided would be good and fit well with the neighborhood. And then this is another scenario they looked at with a little higher development on the northern part of the site. So the idea would be, per the picture on the lower right, this is what it potentially could look like versus what you see on the picture on the upper left, where there's public gathering space out there with seating, with landscaping, some greenscape included. The parking is to the rear of the buildings. It's not like the central feature on the property. You have, it's an area for public gathering. I think it's a much friendlier pedestrian and neighborhood environment than what we have on most of East Avenue right now. East Avenue itself, in my opinion, really detracts from the broader area, but it's really kind of, there's a lot of unattractive architecture. There's a lot of areas where all you see is asphalt. It's not friendly from a pedestrian point of view, and it's not somewhere you really want to walk unless you have to. The last part of which I highlighted a little bit, was the appendice, which is really dealing with the design guidelines. So how the design guidelines work is someone proposes a redevelopment in the area. We have the design guidelines which provide guidance to them. So the idea is they know that this is what the community wants in this area. So if hopefully they build to this standard, I have a better chance of getting an approval for the project that I really want to build. And as part of the design review process, the city has an on-call peer review architect, which we utilize right now. The applicant has to pay the city to hire that peer review architect. So he works directly for us, not for the applicant. So we pay him out of the funds provided by the applicant. And so I think the process has worked really well with several projects that have been approved in South Norwalk, namely One Chestnut, and also the Clark property. Even though they're not under construction right now, they've been approved. And I think once we got through the first couple stumbling blocks between the applicant and the peer review architect, it's gone more smoothly. And even to the point now where one of the architects has recommended the peer review architect for a court case on a completely different project. So I think that works to the testament of the working relationship between the different parties. And here's just a couple more pictures of some of the architecture we looked at. We got examples from Newburyport, Massachusetts, in Greenwich, in Westport, Rockport, Mass. I think they even looked at Glover, Mass, as some different examples of kind of some like that nautical theme, which is one of the items that the neighbors in East Norwalk indicated that they wanted to see in the area. And here's just a couple more pictures of some of the things we're looking at in terms of public infrastructure. The design guidelines also talk about storefronts. They talk about streetscape, signage, lighting, and we're working with Vanessa in DPW on providing detailed streetscape plans in terms of what kind of sidewalk materials are going to be required. So that way, when the developer comes in, there's really not any question mark on what he has to do, or he or she has to do, I should say. And I think that's all I got. Happy to take any questions.
Great, Steve. Any questions? I think everyone fell asleep.
That's how I like to leave my audiences.
Nope, we're still awake.
I'm here.
Not because of you, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Steve, great. I mean, it's been a pleasure working with you on the subcommittee, and you've done a great job of keeping the community and residents in the area informed and involved. I mean, you've had so many public, meetings, and I mean, everyone I talk to says, they know what's going on, and they don't feel like anything's happening without their knowledge, and it's It's gone very well. Steve, can you let us know a little bit about where we are in the process? I believe you do have a draft, and can you explain to us what the next steps are, and when do we plan to get that here to the planning committee? And timeline of everything, if you could, please.
Sure. So one of the requirements of the process is we have to incorporate this plan into the plan of conservation and development. So that has to go through the same process of approval that we went through with the POCD itself. So the planning commission will ultimately have to hold 2 public hearings and consider the document. It'll get referred to the council through the planning committee. So you have the option to hold a hearing on that as well if you would like. The one thing that hasn't been decided and discussed yet is whether we hold a separate public hearing just for the neighbors before that process, with the really tricky part being we can't really hold everybody in like the community room right now because it's just not going to function with the social distancing. So that's a little bit to be determined. So, but as you mentioned, the draft plan has been sent to the committee overlooking the study. They talked about it a little bit last night. We have another meeting set up the week after next. So I'm hoping within a couple of weeks, all the edits will be back to the consultant, and then it'll take them a week or 2 to turn that around. At which point, if it's green lighted, then it would go out, we put it on the city's website. We would get it to your body as well as the planning commission to look at. And that way it's more, front and center in the approval process.
Okay, so
in June, you'll get a look at it in June. What day, I don't know, but in June.
Okay, great. Any questions? All right, Steve, thank you for your patience, in being with us tonight and getting us this information. It was very helpful, and we all look forward to hearing more down the road.
Jeff, Steve, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative.
Sure.
Okay, I believe that is the last item on the agenda. Thank you, everyone. It's been we had a lot to cover, and we made it through. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Sorry, Tom.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.